All right. Wow, this is the most people we've had since before the pandemic. It's good to see people that are here and everybody covered with masks. Thank you for coming. Welcome to the Tuesday, October 5th, 2021 regular meeting of the Walnut Creek City Council. The City Council is conducting this meeting from the City Council chamber, and staff are complying with the current regulations of the California Department of Public Health and Cal OSHA for safe indoor meetings. We're continuing to allow for remote public comments via Zoom, in addition to in-person comments. We require that all in-person attendees wear masks consistent with the Contra Costa County health orders. As some attendees may be participating in their first Walnut Creek City Council meeting, I wanted to welcome everyone and talk briefly about the public comment process. For each agenda item, there will be an opportunity for public comment on the item. Thus, if you desire to speak to an item on the agenda this evening, please hold your comments until the council considers that item. Additionally, we have a section on the agenda titled Public Communications, which is for public comments for items not on the agenda. Any comments during public communication should not relate to an item that is on the agenda this evening. Consistent with Section 9.5 of the City Council Handbook, 30 minutes will be initially allocated for public communications for items not on the agenda. Additional time for public communications for items not on the agenda will be provided at the end of the open session portion of the meeting if necessary. This process is consistent with Section 9.5 of the City Council Handbook, adopted July 15, 2014, and will allow for all public comments to be received during the meeting for items not on the agenda. I should actually let everybody know that we'll be calling people that are in the council chambers first for the public communications portion. When I open the public comment period, we'll use the raised hand feature or press *9 if you're connected by audio only, which will alert staff that you have a public comment you would like to provide. We ask that everyone who wishes to speak on an item please use the raised hand feature to state your intent to speak when the item is called. If you're attending in person, please complete a speaker identification card and line up behind the lectern at the appropriate time. Please wait your turn, and once brought into the meeting, state your name and city of residence for the record. Please keep in mind that this is a city business meeting. The City Council has adopted rules of decorum to ensure that meetings are conducted efficiently and effectively, and that all members of the public have a full, fair, and equal opportunity to be heard. All remarks should be addressed to the City Council. Please do not use profanity during your comments. Given the COVID-19 pandemic and the increased number of speakers that have wanted to make comments on various issues during our meetings, and consistent with city policies related to public comments, each speaker will have 2 minutes to make your remarks. The Zoom feed for each speaker will cut off automatically at 2 minutes. The council will accept oral comments. Written comments submitted have been and will be posted to the city's website for public review and are included in the meeting record, but will not be separately read into the record. To provide a live remote public comment, join the Zoom video conference meeting. The meeting ID is 859-4685-0285. The passcode is 150667. Should you choose to not provide comments but would like to view the meeting, you may do so in one of the following ways. You can go to YouTube Live and visit the City of Walnut Creek's YouTube channel. You can go to cable broadcast Comcast Channel 28 in the incorporated Walnut Creek area, Rossmore Channel 26, Wave Channel 29, and AT&T Uverse Channel 99. And it also can be live streamed online on the city's website. And if now at this time, if you'll please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And would the city clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Darling?
Here.
Councilmember Haskew?
Here.
Councilmember Silva?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Francois?
Here.
And Mayor Wilk?
Here. All right, our first item is a proclamation proclaiming Sustainability Week on October 25th. So I'll first read the proclamation, and then we'll have one speaker, and I think that may be Bob Joe, that'll speak on behalf of the group here for a couple of minutes. So the proclamation is that whereas sustainability improves the quality of our lives, protects our ecosystem, and preserves natural resources for future generations. Whereas the main pillars of sustainability, economic, environmental, and social add value and enhance the quality of life for people, planet, and profits. The last Wednesday in October of each year is known as Sustainability Day, and this year it falls on Wednesday, October 27th, 2021. Whereas Earth Day is very well known and celebrated in the spring of April 22, Sustainability Day remains basically unknown. Walnut Creek is a sustainability leader and is enacting a sustainability action plan. And whereas a coalition of interfaith and sustainable organizations, including Sustainable Walnut Creek, MD, UUC, CAC, ICAN, Contra Costa County, Sustainable Rossmore, Sustainable Lafayette, the Peace Center, Sustainable Contra Costa, Climate Reality Project Bay Area Chapter, Climate Reality Project Contra Costa Chapter, Contra Costa County Climate Leader 4CL, Generation Green, Interfaith Power and Light, 350 Contra Costa, California Interfaith Council, St. Mary's College Sustainability Club, along with others, is organizing events, activities, and speakers for Walnut Creek's first Sustainability Week, October 25th through 31st, 2021. Sustainability Week will attract participants, attendees, visitors, and shoppers to Walnut Creek, and whereas Walnut Creek shares solutions that encourages actions in the Cleaner Contra Costa Challenge, and whereas Walnut Creek is believed to be the first city in the Bay Area region, in the state, and possibly the nation to proclaim and celebrate a Sustainability Week. And therefore, I, Kevin Wilk, Mayor of the City of Walnut Creek, on behalf of the Walnut Creek City Council, do hereby recognize October 25th through 31st, 2021 as Sustainability Week 2021, and encourage residents and visitors to participate in and celebrate this important aspect of our commitment to protect and preserve our environment for present and future generations.
Mayor Wilk, Chamber, sorry. Mayor Wilk, council members, I am so proud to represent the Sustainability Week Coalition organizations. As you heard, there's quite a few organizations that have worked hard to make this happen. And I'm just so proud that of the organizations and of the city for doing this. The coalition has prepared a certificate of achievement, recognition, and appreciation. This is to Mayor Kevin Wilk and the Walnut Creek City Council. Okay, thank you. Thank you. For the historic achievement of being the first city in the nation to proclaim and celebrate Sustainability Week, October 24th through the 30th. There's a day there that, anyway, here's the certificate. It's been a challenge getting all the organizations to sign it. So when they all sign it, then we will present it to the city. Again, just thank you so much.
Thank you again. Thank you, everyone. I'm sure we'll be mentioning some of those events as we get closer to the week itself. Thank you for all. And we've had a picture taken already, so thanks
Mayor,
again.
could we ask a question? Where will they be posting announcements about the events? Because it is 3 weeks away.
Right. So could we ask, actually, if somebody from, Bob, I'm sorry, if you can come back to the dais for a minute. Where will some of the events be? If you could just give us a posted. Where will they be posted?
Yeah, they're on the website, Sustainable Walnut Creek / Sustainability Week.
Sustainability?
Yeah, but we have posted a lot of the flyers downtown, and for people going down Main Street, if they just want to take their phone out and click on the QR code, they'll know the
Terrific.
full schedule. But I would like to mention one of the events that's going to be a lot of fun is EVs and e-bikes at Tiffany's. And so what that's going to consist of, we're on Mount Diablo and Main Street, flanking Tiffany's, there will be the EVs and e-bikes, balloons. It'll be a lot of fun. So you're going to be there
I will
after
be there.
1 o'clock
I will mention
for
it here
some
as
more
well.
photos.
Okay. Thank you again,
Yeah.
Bob.
And then there's going to be the bike parade on the last day. And then there's the farmers market on the 24th. And also we'll end it at farmers market on the 30th. And then the bike parade is going to end up at Civic Park. And we're going to have the School of Rock. They're going to be performing there.
Wonderful. We know they just opened last week.
Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you. Again, thank you all. Right. We next have a presentation for our bi-monthly Heroes Among Us. So throughout 2021, I've had the great pleasure of recognizing some of Walnut Creek's unsung heroes, people who have gone the extra mile during the most challenging of times. Our heroes have come from all walks of life and all parts of Walnut Creek. Each one has made a difference in the lives of others. And tonight we shall shine the spotlight on an entire profession, those who work in healthcare. These are the people who have worked tirelessly and often under incredibly difficult and dangerous circumstances to save lives. Walnut Creek is the home base for a thriving healthcare community with state-of-the-art hospitals and clinics providing care to people in and beyond our city. But before we speak with our heroes joining us tonight, I wanted to take a moment to recognize another hero in the medical field, a Walnut Creek resident, happens to live in Northgate, in my neighborhood, who this week received one of the highest honors imaginable for someone in the field. David Julius received the news this week that he was being awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. A biochemist and molecular biologist, Dr. Julius's work has focused on how our bodies sense heat, cold, and chemical irritants, leading to new insights about the fundamental nature of pain and new targets for pain therapy. He's a PhD, professor and chair of Department of Physiology, and Morris Hertzstein Chair in Molecular Biology and Medicine in UC San Francisco. Many of us at the city know David in a very different role, as a board member and chair of the program committee for the Diablo Regional Arts Association. And David, we hope to be able to say congratulations in person at some point. We're all very proud of your work you've done and continue to do breaking new ground in your field. So much of our attention this past year and a half has been focused on health in a way that is different from any other time in more than a century. The COVID pandemic has impacted all of us, and even as there are signs of improvement, particularly in the Bay Area, the threat remains very real. And throughout it all, our healthcare workers have gone above and beyond to care for the nearly 100,000 Contra Costa residents who have contracted the disease. We invited representatives from two of Walnut Creek's largest employers and healthcare leaders, Kaiser Permanente and John Muir Health, to join us this evening as we say thank you to those who have given so much during the pandemic. And I'd like to ask Chris Boyd, Diablo Area Senior Vice President and Area Manager from Kaiser Permanente, and Tosan Boyo, Senior Vice President of Hospital Operations from John Muir Health, to step forward and share a bit of their experiences. And every worker in your field, from the lab technician to the vaccine researchers, is a hero, and we want you all to know that we are grateful. Love to hear a few words.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, and city staff. I am truly, truly grateful to be here today, and I am humbled and honored to be a health worker and to serve with these fine people behind me. I've been involved with COVID from the moment the Grand Princess cruise ship showed up in the bay. and it seems like forever ago, but for me, it's very much yesterday. In the past 19 months, I'm honored to say that John Muir Health, in December, we've vaccinated provided more than 117,000 shots. We've done everything in our power to prioritize equity in vaccinating the communities. Our mobile clinics are constantly doing everything they can to be present among the most vulnerable in the county to make sure that they get the resources and support needed. We have taken care of over 3,500 residents of the county in need of COVID support and COVID treatment. And I am truly, truly moved every single day by the innovation of health workers, and we're super grateful for the support from the county. And although we are in a fourth surge, things are getting better. I just want to say that everything that we've been able to do, the support from the city, the support from the county, the support from residents and sheltering in place, masking, social distancing, getting vaccinated, has been truly helpful to helping us flatten the curve. And I would not be here today without the team members in this room from John Muir Health, Kaiser Permanente. The constant innovation we've seen has been humbling. Thank you very much for giving us this time today.
Thank you. Did you want to introduce
Yes.
introduce your folks, and then we'll?
Well, I'll go after Chris. I know Chris is going to give some thoughts.
Okay.
I'm just going to hear his
All right, Dr. Kramer.
Okay.
All right, Dr. Kramer, would you like to come through and share some thoughts?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here tonight and meet with all of you. My whole team greatly appreciates this recognition. It's been a long 2 years. It's a global pandemic, but our work is in the community. And I think what message I've taken away from this past 2 years is the great impact we can make on the community around us by working as a team. And that team includes, as Tosan said, everybody in the hospital setting. I'm the ICU director at John Muir, medical director at John Muir, and I'm here with my team, Megan and Kevin, who are ICU nurses. Trudy, who's our nursing director of critical care at Walnut Creek, and Jennifer, our manager. That's our intensive care team that I'm representing. And I can't say enough about how powerful and impactful it's been to have a strong team behind us every step of the way, to be able to look over those masks and see each other in the eye and understand that we are all doing our very best to rise to the occasion and make strong improvements for our patients. Everything from, we like to say, building the airplane as we're flying it, coming up with new innovations for how to treat patients in the critical care setting, for working together as a team of intensivists, reaching out to other physician services, and really working with everyone from respiratory therapy to lab services and so forth, and the community. So thank you for the recognition. It's been a long road for all of us, and we're proud to serve this city.
Thank you so much.
I want to thank you, Mayor Wilk, City Council. Whoa. There, I'm going to do that. All right. And city staff for this recognition, and Tosan hit it right on the head when we say how much we appreciate the support we've always had from this community. And, we've been here a long time. And, every day we come into work and look forward to taking care of our community. And this has been challenging the last 2 years, but it's been inspiring as well. At Kaiser Permanente, our healthcare workers are the true leaders and true heroes of the pandemic. It occurs to me that when most of America was told to shelter in place, these heroes strapped on the boots and went to work. They learned how to master their own anxiety and fears of this new infection. They joined us all as we watched with horror as the events unfolded around the globe. They worked tirelessly, often pulling double shifts. They held hands of the sick and terrified patients because there were no family members at the bedside to hold those hands. They homeschooled their children. They covered for exhausted colleagues. They attended calls and meetings on weekends and holidays. They worked more double shifts. They grieved for the patients that didn't make it, and they celebrated with the many who did. They got vaccinated, and they spread hope. Now, as the new wave of COVID patients initially receded and then surged again, they leaned in, and again, they delivered thoughtful and compassionate care. Years from now, they will tell younger generations that they were the healthcare workers during the COVID pandemic of the early 2020s, and they will be looked at with wonder. Each of the heroes in attendance tonight is here on behalf of the 2,500 team members at the Kaiser Permanente Walnut Creek Medical Center, all who have worked tirelessly during this pandemic. We honor and thank all of them for their hard work. I want to introduce a few of the heroes from our team who are here tonight. And if you could just raise your hands when I call your name. Dr. Ken Grugon, the physician-in-chief for the Diablo service area. Tim Daly, assistant medical group administrator. Dr. Pirush Srivastava, Walnut Creek Medical Center physician site leader. Kimi Omi, Walnut Creek Medical Center Site Director. Jesse Mears, our Emergency Department Manager. Michael Del Rima, the Intensive Care Unit RN. Hector Garza, a respiratory therapist. Artemis Nuval with our Infection Prevention Program. And Araceli Valencia, Environmental Services. Again, I want to thank the City of Walnut Creek for recognizing the heroes among us, and a special thanks to you all for leading the way and encouraging our communities to stay safe and stay vaccinated. We are all in this together.
Thank you very much. You are truly heroes, and I think that deserves the biggest ovation possible. So first, we're going to take a break in just a minute, but we first want to get a picture with everybody that's here from Kaiser, John Muir, or any of the healthcare workers. We'll get a picture up here in front. And then we're going to take a 10-minute break to say thanks personally to everybody. And again, just we're so appreciative of you, us, our entire community. And then we will reconvene at 6:35 for the remainder of our meeting. More than a photo, it's like a thing. Oh, well, exactly. We've got a couple of options. Okay, take a picture up here, right outside, and take it right before the city hall. Let's go outside.
Testing.
She's there. She was there, and she had her whole staff there, and every department head, and we had a whole session where they bring up any idea, doesn't matter if it's a regulatory, doesn't matter if it's regulatory, legislation. right, welcome back to the remaining part of the meeting. Next up is our consent calendar. And does any council member wish to pull any item for discussion? No? Okay. Does any member of the public wish to comment on an item on the consent calendar? This is just the consent calendar. Please use the raised hand feature or press *9 if you're connected by audio only, if you'd like to provide a public comment. For those who desire to provide public comment on consent calendar item, either stand up here against the wall or raise your hand now. As a reminder, each speaker will have 2 minutes to make their oral remarks. The Zoom feed for each speaker will cut off automatically at 2 minutes. Written comments submitted have been and will be posted to the city's website for public review and are included in the meeting record but will not be separately read into the record. At this time, I'll ask the city clerk if there are any members of the public who would like to provide comments on the consent calendar.
Mayor, I don't see any hands raised for public comment on consent calendar items.
All right, well, seeing no speakers, I'll ask the council if anyone would like to make a motion with regard to the consent calendar.
I'll make a motion to approve consent calendar items A through C.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. City clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Haskew,
Aye.
Councilmember Silva,
Aye.
Councilmember Darling,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Francois,
Aye.
and Mayor Wilk.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right. So the next item on the agenda is public communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for comment on items not on the agenda. Under the Brown Act, the council cannot act on items raised during public communications, but may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed, request clarification, or refer the item to staff. Consistent with Section 9.5 of the City Council Handbook, 30 minutes will be allocated at this time for public communications for items not on the agenda. Additional time for public communications for items not on the agenda will be provided at the end of the meeting if necessary. So if you are here to make a public comment in person, you'll start lining up on this side of the wall. Please keep a few feet distance. And if any member of the public that is online or on Zoom wish to provide a public comment at this time, please use the raised hand feature or press *9 if you're connected by audio only, if you would like to provide a public comment. For those who desire to provide public comments on an item not on the agenda, please raise your hand now so that we can identify the total number of speakers that desire to speak at this time. As a reminder, each speaker will have 2 minutes to make their oral remarks, and we ask that you quickly wrap up if it does hit the buzzer. The Zoom feed for each speaker will cut off automatically at 2 minutes. Written comments submitted have been posted to the city's website for public review and are included in the meeting record, but will not be separately read into the record. And again, I'll make mention that we will be calling on people to speak that are here at the City Council chambers first, and assuming that there is still time within the 30 minutes, we'll then call Zoom. If we do hit the 30-minute timeline, then we will be calling everybody else after the items that we're considering on the agenda. So at this time, I'll note that the time is 6:42, and we'll take public comments on items not on the agenda until approximately 7:12, and then the remainder of any such comments at the end of the open session portion of the meeting. So seeing we have some members now, why don't we step on up and please state your name and city of residence.
All right. Hello, I'm Sharice Cound, and I am a resident of the city of Walnut Creek. Hello, Mayor Wilk, council members, community. My name is Sharice Cound. I'm a resident of Walnut Creek. I'm also the president of the Mount Diablo Unified School District School Board, although I'm speaking personally tonight. I'm asking tonight for the council to expand the buffer zone for Planned Parenthood and any women's healthcare clinics in this city. No woman should have to run a gauntlet of intimidation and harassment in order to access affordable healthcare. When I was in my 20s, I was an AmeriCorps Vista volunteer, volunteering in my community and earning a stipend of about $600 a month. During this time, I went to the local Planned Parenthood for preventative checkups, pap smears, and affordable birth control. Looking back, that was the most compassionate, respectful, welcoming healthcare that I have ever received in my life. But I don't know if I would have entered through the doors of that building if there had been protesters on my way in. And these days, that intimidation is stronger than ever throughout our country. I was appalled to find out that protesters here in our city could be so intrusive that volunteers are needed to walk clients safely from their car to the entrance door. please create a much wider buffer zone to ensure women's access to crucial, affordable health care here in our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharice. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Leslie Shafton, and I'm also a Walnut Creek resident, and I'm also the co-president of Women's March Contra Costa. I'm here also pleading for the Walnut Creek City Council to support a buffer zone around Planned Parenthood. I think that this is important. One of my 2 children, his good friend, a couple years ago was accosted in front of Planned Parenthood, and she was a 15-year-old girl, similar to Sharice when I was a teenager. I also utilized the services of Planned Parenthood. And when I spoke to this girl about the incident, she basically said that she wouldn't seek out health care anymore. And I believe that people should have the right and the access to have safe and private health care and to make determinations over their own bodies. So thank you so much for considering this, and thank you.
Thank you, Leslie.
Hi, good evening, City Council members and everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to let me come here and speak. I'm Susie Hanson, I'm board chair of Festival Opera, and I wanted to invite you all to our 30th anniversary gala. It will be a masquerade ball on Friday, October 22nd at the Lafayette Park Hotel. It'll be an evening of music, costumes, food, entertainment, and dancing. The website is festivalopera.org. You may order your tickets online, and we hope to see you all there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susie.
Good evening. I'm Robin Papineau-Kuntz.
Speak close. Wait, closer to. There
Closer.
you go.
How's that? Okay.
Good.
Good evening. I'm Robin Papineau-Kuntz. I live in Antioch. I'm a weekly volunteer at Planned Parenthood in Walnut Creek as a patient escort outside the health center. Tonight, I advocate for the creation of a buffer zone to increase the safety of our clients and the local community. The protesters who are there every week, at least twice a week, block the sidewalk. Some of them sit in chairs that take up half the sidewalk, and people stand in the other half talking to them. I rarely see anyone move out of the way when people walk by, causing pedestrians, sometimes with dogs or children, to walk in the street to pass them. I've seen a protester park her car completely across the sidewalk to load up her signs and refuse to move when I ask her to. I've watched the harassment and intimidation by protesters to clients and the people who accompany them lead to verbal confrontations and almost to physical confrontations. Physical altercations have happened there also, but I haven't witnessed them. A buffer zone for reproductive health centers will assist women and men safely access health care. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
Good evening, Council. I'm Catherine Wally, resident of Walnut Creek. At the September 21st...
Catherine, speak a little bit closer.
Oh, a little
There you
closer.
go.
Great, thank you.
You can bend it.
Is that okay?
Perfect.
At the recent council meeting, I appreciated hearing updates on work being done in furtherance of the council priorities for the 21-22 calendar years. These included promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as social wellness and public safety within our city, priorities which are critical to the well-being of all of us here in Walnut Creek. One of the primary factors impacting whether or not we as a city are able to achieve these aims is the extent to which we promote conditions that ensure that all members of our community are able to access and maintain safe, dignified, and stable housing. Unfortunately, this is not the case for everyone here, with some members of our community facing threats of unjust evictions within a system that is greatly stacked against tenants. One tactic used by bad actor landlords to circumvent rent control and eviction protections is harassment, a tactic which disproportionately is used against the most marginalized. Harassment can take many forms, including but not limited to discriminatory behaviors like sexual harassment, racial and disability discrimination, threats of violence, or threats of reporting tenants to immigration authorities. Evictions devastate physical and mental health, harm children's development and education, make it harder to find housing and employment. After an eviction, renters are at an increased risk of ending up homeless, losing child custody, or dying.
I urge members of this council to adopt both a tenant anti-harassment ordinance and a stronger just cause for eviction ordinance. Such ordinances will open up pathways by which tenants have the ability to enforce their rights against landlords who engage in these behaviors, while simultaneously removing financial incentives for harassment through the addition of penalties. Adopting such ordinances will be a tangible and meaningful step that this council can take to act in alignment with its 2021 and 22 priorities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Catherine. It's good to see you in person.
I know. It's
And we heard you
wonderful.
great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, City Council members, Mayor Wilk. It's nice to see you. My name is Janae McCullough. I'm an owner of Telus Coffee here in downtown Walnut Creek, and I'm a resident of Concord. I would like to speak on the recent vaccine mandate and share my experience of how it has affected my business thus far. To date, we've had fights break out in my shop between pro and anti-vaccine mandate customers, putting my staff at risk, and the police had to be called on several occasions. I've been yelled at, threatened, personally targeted, and harassed by supporters both for and against the vaccine mandate. I've been called a racist, segregationist, compared to a Nazi, and received a slew of hate, both written and in person, from members of our community. Due to all of this, I've filed a police report out of fear for my safety, and I now keep a taser at Telus for the protection of myself and my staff. All of this may seem it is strictly coming from only anti-mandate customers. However, it is not. Pro-mandate supporters have threatened to revoke my business license if I do not enforce the mandate, which was never something I've discussed doing, accused me of not wanting to keep my customers safe, and berated me on how I should be running my business. Just today, someone asked me how the mandate has affected us, and after telling them all that has happened, they looked at me and said, "All of that aside, don't you want to keep your customers safe?" We are at a point that I cannot even talk about the reality of what is going on without being accused of something completely out of my control. Of course, I want to keep my customers safe. That goes without saying. But their safety is coming at the sacrifice of my own and my staff. I would personally like to thank Mayor Wilk for coming to tell us the day the mandate took effect. He requested I send any irate customers to him while he was at Telus, and that definitely provided some reassurance to everyone working that day. I would like to end with a question to you all, excuse me. What are you doing to protect businesses and their staff from the constant harassment we are receiving due to the mandate? Also, what do you suggest we do to navigate these situations as both restaurant owners and now acting enforcement agencies? Thank you.
Thank you, Janae. Janae, Chief Knox, would you mind speaking with Janae in the back there? Thank you. Janae, so Chief Knox will talk with you about just about some details you just mentioned as well. And thank you for explaining what was going on.
Good evening. I'm O.G. Strogatz. I live in Walnut Creek. Tonight, I ask that you enact an ordinance to establish a protest-free buffer zone around the Planned Parenthood Clinic at 1357 Oakland Boulevard in Walnut Creek. My request is grounded in pretty basic principles. I have a master's in public health focused on health policy and administration. Anyone seeking health care should have ready access to reliable, balanced information to support their decision-making in a manner that honors patient privacy. Because each individual's experiences with seeking and receiving health care should be respected as confidential and private, it is inappropriate to engage patients in active communication about treatment decision-making immediately outside any healthcare facility. Over the last 2 years, I have served 22 shifts as a Planned Parenthood volunteer patient escort in the parking lot of the Walnut Creek Planned Parenthood Clinic. On every shift, I have seen flagrant violation of these basic principles. On the sidewalk flanking the parking lot, anti-choice protesters confront all who enter the lot with grotesque images of dismembered fetuses and signs opposing abortion, while none of us present has knowledge about the intention of an individual's visit to the clinic, nor should we. The protesters make assumptions about who has come for an abortion and implore those individuals not to deny their baby's life and instead to confer directly with the protesters for advice. The protesters use bullhorns to harangue and read scripture to everyone present. Numerous patients and their drivers have asked me or other volunteer escorts why the protesters insist on this behavior, which the patients and drivers find most unwelcome, intrusive, and upsetting. I respond that I think the protesters believe they are exercising their First Amendment right to free speech. But this is harassment. It's an abuse of a precious right. I request a protest-free buffer zone surrounding the Planned Parenthood clinic. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, OG.
Hello, my name is Tammy Chakowski. I also am a volunteer escort at Planned Parenthood for a little over 2.5 years. I don't live in Walnut Creek, but I work at Walnut Creek Intermediate School. And my concern is not only the safety of the Planned Parenthood clients, but the Walnut Creek citizens. Just like my friend over there who mentioned that she sees people walking into the street to avoid the protesters on the sidewalks, they don't turn around and look to see if a car is coming. And it's, excuse the cliche, but it's an accident waiting to happen. The other day when I was volunteering, I watched a young man driving a truck turn to look at the signs. He veered into the other side of the road and smashed head-on to an SUV. The woman was taken away in an ambulance. I've seen young girls grabbed by the arm and pulled back, and they wouldn't let go until the girl threatened to punch them in the face. I've also seen husbands come out of their car and plead with the protesters to stop shouting through the bullhorn. When they did not, punches started flying. I'm really concerned that the violence and the accidents are going to escalate, so I'm requesting your help in creating a buffer zone around all reproductive health clinics in Walnut Creek. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy.
Good evening. Nice to be here in public. Jan Warren, a resident of Walnut Creek. I also am supporting the ladies who've spoken about the buffer zone. I worked in the building just next door for about 9 years, some years ago. But even back then, you know, they were blocking sidewalks and had their signs, and of course things have only escalated since then. I recently signed up to also be an escort because I feel like people have a right to have, you know, public health and take care of themselves. And I recently read something about, for whatever reason, they're targeting Walnut Creek, Napa.
Closer to the mic. Closer.
They're targeting Walnut Creek, Napa, and San Francisco. So I don't know how we got on the list. But it is a small lot. It's not much space from the street, and so I ask for your support for the buffer zone. I'm also here to request a discussion on anti-harassment ordinance for tenants who live in our city. There has been increasing harassment, seems like everywhere around here, and there is no specific state law that protects our tenants from harassment. These people who want to harass, and I think you know who they are because they've been in the news, they'll come into your house and they'll go through your things and they'll turn off your water and they'll turn off the security light and they will threaten you, and they will not cash your check that you've given them for rent because they want you to leave so that they can paint the walls and do a few things and then up the rent. And we don't want that sort of thing in Walnut Creek. They've been terrorizing people in Concord for years, and we need to get something on the books that keeps our tenants safe so they can sleep at night and be secure with their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan.
Hello, board members. My name is DeShare Young, and I live at 1366 Oakland Boulevard in Walnut Creek. I also work at the John Muir Hospital in Walnut Creek just as well. I'm here tonight to advocate for stricter laws for for landlords that's trying to put tenants out of their homes. I have been living in Walnut Creek for the past 12 years. I love the area I live in. I love the city, and I also love my neighbors that was harassed and bullied out of the place that we all got along. And all of us were different nationalities, but we loved each other as one. Unfortunately, this new landlord that we have, Steven Penza, is not such a nice person. He's always around the apartment harassing us, calling us bad names. And for a man of his stature, I wouldn't believe that he would say the words that he, the racist words that he has been using to us. He's, talking me like, you know, slang talk, like we friends or something, and we're not friends. He harassed my neighbors, almost sent her to the hospital. Oh my goodness, I just could go on and on. I have seen him cuss one of my neighbors out, a former neighbor out. I couldn't believe he called her, you know, B words and everything else. This man is horrible. We do need tougher laws for landlords like him. So that way he just can't come and throw us out anytime he feel that he wants to. Yeah, we need your help really, really desperately. And I do hope by me coming tonight that you guys will really, you know, help us and create some laws on the books to stop this man from harassing us or victimizing us every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Disher.
Hello, members of the council. My name is Dabia Benakli. I am one of, adding to what the two last ladies said, and Deshir is my neighbor. I've been living for 11 years in the same building. I am a preschool teacher. I'm raising my two kids by myself, have full custody. And just like she said, since May 31st, he was harassing us. And he started when he was visiting the apartments. He was even overheard with some racist comments that were just Arabic and black people will be kicked out very easily, and that's what happened. Yes, that's what happened. 12 people out of 15 were asked to leave, and he comes every week or two, and he does the same thing. Usually he shut off the water, turn off the outside lights, throw away our kids' bikes, our kids' balls, so literally like don't have your kids play. And recently, 2 weeks ago, it became more personal. He literally insulted me. I was shaking. I got into panic attack, and I lost my words because I didn't expect all that to happen. It was a lot of pressure. I explained to him the situation, that I have two kids. I want to keep them safe, and I pay the rent the whole 11 years I've been there. Never been late, never had a trouble. But he literally doesn't care. And I said, so I'm making $2,000-ish a month. I'm living at $2,000 a month. Their dad is not helping. I'm still trying to the court, but he's not helping. And I'm just trying to keep a roof and food for these kids. And he just didn't care. And going back, because the last person that he saw me with was my husband. So I said, this is the stepdad. And I tried, didn't work. He didn't want the kids. So he literally became personal. And he insulted me. That was the situation. So now we need tonight a law that protecting us from this harassment, from this personal targeting low-income people like me. I'm a preschool teacher, by the way. And I just started working yesterday. I was without a job for more than a year because I had to keep my kids at home, and it was not my choice. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. All right. It looks like we don't have any more speakers in person, so let's go to Zoom now.
Okay, first speaker is Deborah Carboni.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, sorry, I was having some technical issues. Yes, so I'm Deborah Carboni. I'm a longtime resident of Walnut Creek, and I would just like to echo what other women have said tonight about the need for a buffer zone around Planned Parenthood and all medical facilities. Everyone has the right to seek the medical attention that they need. Planned Parenthood in particular provides so many more services than abortion. You know, people just seem to associate it with abortion only, and it's a very, very needed service for not only women, but men go to Planned Parenthood for health services. So I just want to echo what everyone else said, and I am requesting a buffer zone around the Walnut Creek Planned Parenthood as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.
Next speaker is Jackie Zanari.
Good evening. This is Jackie Zaneri. I'm an attorney with the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment, or ACE, with our Contra Costa chapter. And I'm here to talk about the tenant laws that Walnut Creek is lacking. So first is a just cause for eviction ordinance. That is the idea that a tenant cannot be evicted for no reason. There has to be a reason that is in the law. And as an attorney who has represented many tenants in eviction cases in both jurisdictions with local tenant protections and those without, I can tell you that the difference between a tenant being able to stay in their home long-term and being forced out is generally the difference between those local laws. Walnut Creek does not have any of those local protections. And here we're especially concerned about no fault and no cause evictions. So this is a tenant who has paid the rent, complied with their lease, but is still getting evicted. And we heard from 2 tenants just now who are going through that right now, and many of their neighbors were already displaced. So without those tenant protection laws, it is easy for a bad actor to come into the city and evict a whole building in order to turn over the units and raise the rent. And just to be clear, state and county moratoriums have expired, so tenants cannot rely on those protections, especially if they're being evicted for a no-fault reason. And the second ordinance that other cities do have, but Walnut Creek does not, is a tenant anti-harassment ordinance. A number of cities have passed their own laws, and these laws say that it is unlawful for a landlord to do specific things that we can all agree are beyond the pale. Failing to make repairs, failing to take care in making repairs, threatening a tenant, removing their housing services, shutting off their utilities, threatening to call immigration authorities on them, when done for the purpose of forcing them out of their home. This type of ordinance is privately enforceable, meaning it is not dependent on city resources, but it is a big deterrent for those bad actors. And for other landlords, it just has no effect. It can be a very destabilizing thing not to have any local tenant protections. So I ask that you look into passing both of these ordinances, a just cause ordinance and an anti-harassment ordinance.
Next speaker is Gilda Gonzalez.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Good evening. I'm Gilda Gonzalez, CEO and President of Planned Parenthood Northern California, anchored in Concord. And as you've heard from many of the attendees, we have a situation going on in Walnut Creek. Our affiliate, our Planned Parenthood affiliate, serves 20 counties throughout Northern California. And Walnut Creek is one of the 2 worst sites of harassment that we are facing. We serve approximately 6,800 community members. 65% of these patients are low income and have endured some of the greatest hardships during the pandemic. We, in fact, were the only one of a few regional sites that accepts Medicaid and Medi-Cal and stayed open during the pandemic. Multiple times a week, our staff and our patients are under siege by hostile protesters. And therefore, we strongly support a buffer zone ordinance outside our health center. The harassment and obstruction of our driveway is unacceptable, and our staff and patients deserve better. Everyone deserves the right to access reproductive health care services without fear, violence, and intimidation. Outside this health center is chaotic, with the presence of hostile protesters in a narrow sidewalk space, causing a nuisance and a health risk to all. And Mayor, you've taken my call after one particular ugly incident, and I thank you for that. And I'm counting on this esteemed body to stand up for our patients who need your support now. And I also want to thank Police Chief Knox and Lieutenant Laughter for their honorable service and partnership with us. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you, Gilda.
Next speaker is Denise G.
You there, Denise? Denise? she on? Okay. Denise, if you're on, go ahead.
I am here.
There
Hear
we
me
go.
now?
We hear you now.
So sorry. Thank you very much. Denise Glickland, resident of Lafayette, 3.5-year escort volunteer at the Planned Parenthood in Walnut Creek. And I wanted to point out that we've watched an escalation over these short 3 years from what had once been rather respectful written signage and sometimes people silently praying for patients coming in that have now moved to very, very graphic, obscene abortion giant posters. We've gone from people talking to now shouting to in unison calling out to carrying megaphones. And now we have at least 3 people who are coming with cameras that they keep that are at chest level, and they keep in people's faces and seem to be scanning car license plates. Very intimidating. And one of my biggest concerns is cars are entering and exiting. And again, these protesters are flanking this public sidewalk, which they have every right to be on, into this narrow area. And I've seen, because we've all been trained to watch out for pedestrians and anybody driving in a 3,000-pound vehicle entering this area is going to be cautious to protect the life out there. These people are hesitating to turn into the driveway because it's being encroached by these protesting pedestrians. So they hesitate, and I've seen at times as they're hesitating to pull into the lock, then they can possibly be causing traffic obstruction because people are now having to suddenly stop behind them because these cars are hesitating to pull in. It's worse when pulling out, and especially in the summer months when a car's been sitting and waiting while somebody's had an appointment. People will usually put their car windows down about to exit to let the car cool down, regardless of whether they're going to put on air conditioning. And this we have recognized starts to be an invitation for.
Next speaker is Kim West.
And it looks like we're going to have just time for this one last speaker within this 30-minute window. Anybody that's not able to speak at this time that would like to after will be able to take more public comments after our consideration item that'll be following in the meeting in a few minutes.
Hi, thank you for having us this evening. My name is Kim West. I'm a resident of Richmond, and I too am a clinic escort for Planned Parenthood. I've volunteered for over 10 years in San Francisco and now in Walnut.
Oh. Frozen.
It's on her end.
Kim, it looks like you're frozen on your end. Well, give it a couple more seconds here. Try turning off your video if you can hear me, Kim, so that we can at least hear you. No. All right. Well, unfortunately, Kim, I think we lost the connection with you on this. We did note the topic of your comment, and if you'd like to speak later in the meeting, I encourage you to please speak after we're having the remainder of public comments. But at this time, we're at 7:12, and so we'll suspend the public comments at this time. The Zoom, is it on our end? Okay, well, so for anybody that heard that, we have a Zoom technology problem right now for people that are trying to connect, but you can still, if you can hear this, you're still able to get the connection on the other channels that we are broadcasting the meeting on, and of course anybody in the chamber is able to hear this as well. Matt, let me just quickly ask you, should we? Yeah, okay, that's what I was going to suggest. All right, let's take a 5-minute break and we'll try to get the technology back on track. Okay, our technical glitch has been solved. We're back up on Zoom. So since we unfortunately had to cut off the last speaker who was still in the time frame, I'm going to give a few seconds here to, if you want to speak, excuse me, if you want to speak on this, excuse me a second. If you want to speak during public communications, then please raise your hand now.
We have Luz Reyna.
Okay, let's bring Luz on.
Hi, this is in regards to a different issue, not public communication.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said this is in regards to another issue, not public communications.
Okay.
Should I wait until further notice?
Yes, we have one more consideration item, and that's on cannabis. And if you want to speak on that item, then you'll wait until the comments for that point, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks. Do we have any other public comments?
No additional speakers.
Okay, so again, I apologize for the Zoom glitch on our end. If you have any comments to make for public communications still, then please wait for the end of the meeting after the consideration item. Raise your hand, and we will be reopening public communications at that time for items not on the agenda. So we have a lot of speakers during this 30 minutes, and let me ask if any council members have any questions or comments or questions of staff that they would like to make regarding any of the topics raised by any of the speakers during public communications. Councilmember Silva.
Thank you very much. We heard a number of people again. It's the fall season with the protesters on Oakland Boulevard across from the Planned Parenthood or adjacent to it. What technically can we do to create a buffer zone that is enforceable without denying First Amendment rights?
So, Councilmember Silva, the U.S. Supreme Court has issued a number of decisions that relate to potential buffer zones around facilities similar to Planned Parenthood. And we should keep in mind these are opinions from a number of years ago, so it does not necessarily reflect the composition of the Supreme Court now or the position that they would adhere to now. But the courts have allowed and have upheld limited buffer zones in some of the cases, typically that are very specific to allowing a path of travel into the facility, not a very broad buffer, so not around the entire facility if it's not necessary. The courts have generally not been favorable to limiting visual images because the courts have said that people can pass by those without looking at them if they choose to. But in terms of just the access issue, the courts have allowed the adoption of ordinances which allow access into and out of the facility in a narrow band, if you will, a narrow width.
So does that mean just a driveway, or what about the very narrow sidewalk that if they're blocking the sidewalk going north and south on the west side of Oakland Boulevard, you're forcing people into the street?
Right. So the rationale that the courts have looked at have been access to that and safety. And so there could be some limitations with regards to the fact that there is the need for people to be able to use the sidewalk for its normal purpose of being able to move along the street without having to step into it. If the council was interested in understanding the scope of what was permissible in terms of regulations, we could bring that back to the council with both an idea of what the council could consider in terms of regulations, also looking at it from the perspective of kind of a site plan and actual access into the facility.
I'm interested.
All right.
Because we don't want to see this repeating over and over again, and it's a very narrow piece of sidewalk along there. It's not, if it's 5 feet, I would be surprised.
Okay, so the question is, and we'll get to Mayor Pro Tem Francois, do you have any comments on the same issue?
I do.
Okay,
yeah.
so let's go to question. Okay, let's go to question from Councilmember Darling and then Mayor Pro Tem Francois.
This is just a quick question, and it has to do with the site. I've heard rumors that there had been a traffic incident in the area at a time where the protesters were there, and I was wondering if you had any details on that, or if that's,
I don't personally have any details. There have been some incidents in the past at the facility involving both protesters and counter-protesters. I don't know, Chief Knox, do you have any information about?
I don't know in that specific incident. There was an incident, I just don't have the details.
So we just note for the record that he's saying that they don't have any specific information. We can look into that if the council would like us to come back with a report so that you have an idea of what the history of incidents would be. It is important that when the council considers adopting regulations, that we have a solid basis upon which to identify the need for the regulation, in particular in this case, because it does impact, constitutional rights, both of the folks, the people who are using the facilities, as well as the people who are protesting in support of or against the facilities.
yeah, I'd be very interested in knowing some of the safety history, because I think that would bear on what I'd be interested in doing.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a related question. So in addition to the legality of the buffer zone, Steve, my understanding is there's a state law that makes it unlawful to harass any woman or any person attending a healthcare clinic. And so if that's already on the books, sort of what sort of enforcement can we be doing at the city level to address that?
So we can report on that back to the council. I'm not familiar with that as we're sitting here right now. We can report back to the council on that, but the city's regulation, if the city were to adopt, would be an additional layer of regulation. So the enforcement would be both under the state law provisions as well as what the city would adopt if the city chose to adopt an ordinance. This would have to be in the form of an ordinance that the council would consider, and then it would come with it the violations that are associated with that, be that an infraction or some ability to get some type of injunctive relief to be able to maintain the ability and the access to the facility.
Okay, thank you.
And I would agree. We're hearing about these incidents more frequently. We're seeing some of the reports on that. We heard from a number of speakers tonight. And I did hear about a traffic accident that happened about 2 months ago that there was a distraction from one of the protesters too. So there does seem to be an uptick in aggression on this. So Councilmember Silva, you had mentioned that you'd be interested in seeing a report back and
What our options are, if any.
Okay, so a report back with options that could potentially include an ordinance. Is everybody in agreement with that?
Yes.
Everybody in agreement?
Let's make it clear, we are not asking for them to write an ordinance. We're asking for a list of options that might include.
Right. Reports that.
We want to set expectations correctly
that would,
in the public.
That would include all the different options.
Yes.
So we have.
And some of the history that would allow us to measure some of the need for an ordinance.
And, and what's available already so that we can really use the bigger picture.
Okay. All right, looks like we have consensus on that. Terrific, thank you. All right, that was one of the items that was raised. Any comments on any other items that were raised by anybody? I have a question then on the eviction harassment, and let me ask the city attorney on this. Can you please clarify what Walnut Creek can do, if anything, in this type of an instance where there is obviously some harassment that's going on, but I know the county has taken more of a direct involvement in this?
Sure. So the county has taken a more direct involvement in the particular incident that the council was hearing about tonight, and I understand they've been looking into this. The city could, if it chose to, adopt ordinances that are in the line of a just cause eviction ordinance or potentially a anti-harassment ordinance. There are a number of policy considerations that are associated with those types of ordinances. Some cities have adopted them, others have not. There are also state regulations, obviously discrimination protection and housing legislation to prevent discrimination based on protected classes. And there are also existing protections to assist people who suffered financially during the pandemic to be able to try to get rent assistance through the state's programs before individuals can be evicted for failure to pay rent during the time period. And the level of protections depends on exactly when the rent wasn't paid. But there is a time period right now where if someone gets an eviction notice due to the failure to pay rent, as long as they respond to that within 15 days and they try to seek rental assistance through the state program, then that limits the ability of a landlord to effectuate an eviction due to failure to pay rent. The idea being that if there's a way to allow the landlord to be made whole, you should try to keep the tenants in their properties. That's a state program.
Yeah, Councilmember Darling?
Quick question. This was probably before I was on council, but I remember watching one of the budget sessions where they were talking about, where you were discussing providing funding to a nonprofit to help with tenant relations and help tenants pursue claims like this. Do you know, has that information been provided to the people that spoke tonight? Or can we find a way to get that to them?
The city has funded, I'm going to defer a bit to the city manager here, but to my recollection, the city has funded through the CDBG program rental assistance and tenant assistance, and that is tenant advocacy groups that then can step in, and those resources are available to tenants who are actually encountering problems now. With that, I'd have to defer to others to kind of complete the answer.
Yeah, I would just add to this, and we do have our housing manager, Margot Ernst, here, who can provide more detail when you come on up, Margot. But while she's doing that, just as way of background, when this issue was raised a little while back, the state and county eviction ordinances were in place, and we did actively intervene to help connect these folks with the state and county resources. And there is information that's still pending with the district attorney's office at this point in time.
Yeah, hi, good evening, Mayor, members of the councils. I'm Margot Ernst, the housing manager for the city. And to just address that question, we do have funding for both fair housing services, tenant landlord services, and then through the CDBG CV funds, which was the one-time kind of coronavirus stimulus money, we actually funded for like a half-time attorney that could provide free legal services to tenants who are facing eviction, and that information has been passed along to the group as well.
Thank you. All right, any other comments or questions based upon what we heard from the speakers? All right, with that, we will close the council portion of the public communications, and we will now go to our next agenda item, council member and staff announcements, reports on activities, or requests. First is closed session announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There were no closed sessions held today, and there are no closed session announcements.
City manager report.
Yeah, good evening. Dan Buckshire, city manager. I do not have an update this evening, Mayor.
All right, council member reports on AB 1234 activities, council member assignments, and various activities and upcoming events. Why don't we start with Mayor Pro Tem Francois.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening to all. I attended the Recycle Smart Board meeting on September 23rd, and on that agenda, we deferred action on extension of a 2-year contract with MDR to get further information from Republic Services, but the primary informational item we received was an update from Tony Mancini, the general manager of Republic Services. As many residents are aware, there have been some slippages in service, garbage service, recycling service, compost service, and Mr. Mancini was able to explain that a lot of that is due to COVID and to a result of a state law that allowed for increased paid time off for workers to not only care for themselves, but for family members. That left Republic Services, an essential worker, short-staffed in terms of delivery drivers. And so they've been making efforts, and they've had job fairs and trying to hire new new truck drivers to pick up the trash, and they recognize it's a major concern. The Recycle Smart board staff recognizes it's a major concern. And we're hopeful now with the turning the corner on COVID and with hopefully making a kind of getting a more bright future, that more of the delivery drivers will be back at work, and that will have resolved that issue. But I would encourage anyone who has missed their delivery service to either contact the Recycle Smart Board staff or our Public Works staff, because under our contract with Republic Services, we collect those complaints and can potentially impose penalties for the missed services. I would also like to report on, I attended the Golden Rain Foundation, the Rossmore Directors Board meeting last week. I gave them an update on our priorities on Community Service Day on October 9th and some of the actions we had taken on the Legislative Committee. Let's see, I also attended the DRAA fundraiser on Broadway with all of my council colleagues, and I'll let Councilmember Haskew talk about that as liaison to DRAA, but it was nice to be there live and in person again. And then I also wanted to share I thought this was some good news. The Walnut Creek Running Festival is returning to Walnut Creek on Saturday, December 11th. It won't be a half marathon this year, but it'll be a 5K and a 10K. So that leaves plenty of time to start training now for the December 11th race. And I've done that run before when Councilmember Haskew was the mayor and leading us all off. And it's a really good, fun time. Can be a chilly morning, but it's nice to start the day early and see fellow residents. So
You may be the one leading that off.
I may be, yes. So that's December 11th at Civic Drive. You can go on the Walnut Creek Running Festival website. That is my report.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Let's go to Councilmember Darling.
Thank you. I did get to go to the League of California Cities this year in person, which was a lot of fun. I got to meet people that I have met for a year and a half and had no idea how tall they were. And so that was fun. I also got to learn an awful lot at that one. Community Service Day, we had our last social media post in limbo because of Facebook, but it's out there and it's coming up on the 9th. I did sit in for one MCE board meeting. It was the shortest board meeting we've ever had. I was at the Portland airport, and they just got enough of us together to approve their consent calendar and get their contracts underway. But managed to do that. Managed to fit into my garments for On Broadway, which was a personal triumph. And my favorite thing in the world, I got to sit with a young man who is going for Eagle Scout. He's already completed his project. He needed to talk to an elected person for his last merit badge. And the last time I saw him, he was maybe about 11 years old and had no ability to sit still. And it was great. He asked me all kinds of questions on homelessness and what he could do. And it was a really fun time. It's the good part of being elected.
That's great. Let's go to Councilmember Haskew.
Thank you. Well, I do have to really brag about On Broadway. All the gods were with us because the weather was gorgeous. We had it outside of a tent. Lots and lots of people were there. We had delicious food. We had interesting auction items to tempt us. And the purpose of this was to raise funds to keep the theater going and to help support Arts Access, which does an amazing job of giving children who might not otherwise have a chance to have live theater experiences find out that there is something besides TV and social media. While we're at it, I also attended as the representative of the council, the Redney Plaza Art panel, and it was a lively discussion, and we'll see how everything turns out. CCTA did have a meeting about whether we could keep on with the Brown Act at the very last minute on the 30th at 6 o'clock. And we voted to do that, so CCTA will be able to continue to have their Zoom meetings. We swore in a police officer. It's nice to see young people getting involved in that. And last but not least, a very personal brag. I got a booster shot in this arm, and within a few days, I got a flu shot in that arm. So I hope I get through the winter with not even a cold.
And you look great.
Thank you.
Councilmember Silva.
And you still have both arms.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mayor. As the liaison to the Walnut Creek Chamber of Commerce and the Walnut Creek Convention and Visitors Bureau, I have attended their board meetings and kept abreast of what has been happening and helped keep them abreast of what's been going on locally. The interesting conversation at the Convention and Visitor Bureau meeting last week, which is basically an organization of the hoteliers. One, they were very interested in the collection of TOT for short-term rentals, translates Airbnb, VRBO, et cetera. And so that was a good conversation. The second is that they are putting together a group to study a conference center. So we will see where that goes. Next week, the Civic Affairs Forum topic is the census and redistricting. The keynotes will be Supervisor Karen Mitchoff and David Twa, the former county administrative officer, is actually managing the redistricting process for the county as a special project on assignment, and they will both be participating. It's a very important issue because as we redraw the district borders from school districts to water districts, sanitary districts, supervisorial districts, as well as Congress, et cetera. It is happening at the local level. That will be next Tuesday, October 12th at 9 a.m., and you can visit the Chamber of Commerce website to sign up for it. It will be just 1 hour. The Recycle Smart had a finance committee meeting last week as well, and we are bringing forward proposals on new ways to manage our reserves. Because we used to collect revenues for the sale of recyclable products, those actually created our reserves. And now, since we are no longer able to sell recyclables at the kinds of prices we were previously able to, we need to ensure that we are retaining the correct amount of reserves for operating expenses, and then having a process whereby those reserves can be allocated to the 6 independent agencies that are members of the Joint Powers Authority called Recycle Smart in order to deploy those resources within our communities. Thank you to all who organized the On Broadway event last Saturday night. You've heard about it, but I think most significantly it helped to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars to support the arts and arts access in our community. Yesterday, I had an opportunity to attend a ceremony at the County Clerk Recorder and Elections Office, which was being renamed for the almost 30-year Clerk Recorder Steve Weir. And it was very momentous and very nice. And the only reason I was there was not because of being an elected official, but because my husband is one of the biking group that Steve Weir bikes with. So all the bros were going, so I hung out as well. And yes, I was at the annual conference for the League of California Cities. I'm glad my colleagues were there as well and able to attend some of the sessions. And no,
And Councilmember Silva. Well, I'm going to say it because you just said it, but Councilmember Silva is now president of the California League of Cities for the entire state.
Thank you. I will let the mayor talk about the items that were voted on as part of the annual business meeting. And I will announce that this Saturday is our Community Service Day, and until 8:30 tomorrow morning, you can still sign up for a few things. Then the site closes for online registrations tomorrow, so we can compile sign-up sheets. So if you haven't signed up, just go to the homepage of the city, walnut-creek.org, click the big banner as it goes by. It's orange and green, you can't miss it, and then click the volunteer button on the next page, and you can sign up. And thank you very much, Mayor.
And actually, Councilmember Silva, if I could have you talk to those 2 items that we did vote on. My notes on that are somewhere else, and I know that you've got these very intimately remembered.
There were 3 items that the business meeting of the League of California Cities representatives from 480 cities voted on a week ago Friday. One were some changes to the bylaws for the organization that basically makes the organizational structure a bit more diverse by incorporating the seat for each of the 5 diversity caucuses onto our state board. And that was passed almost unanimously, but maybe 88% said yes. And then there were 2 resolutions that were adopted by the membership. One was to advocate with the CPUC and other stakeholders who have regulatory authority over the rail lines that run through our state. What many of our communities are having a problem with, South Central Los Angeles, maybe the Richmond corridor, is the amount of graffiti, homelessness, trash, et cetera, that is being left along the rail lines. And the railroads are effectively saying, well, no, you can't come clean it up, but we won't keep it clean either. And so the regulatory authority is actually with the Department of Transportation, Caltrans, the CPUC. And so we adopted a resolution to advocate that funding be appropriately allocated in Sacramento to these regulatory agencies here in the state to enforce what are common sense regulations for those rail lines. And then the second was a question of how do we ensure equity in the distribution of sales tax revenues with the increasing use of online sales and the sales tax that is generated when we buy online and then it goes into a fulfillment center in this state. It's a complicated issue, and we sent it back to committee to be further studied, particularly by our city managers. And thank you to our Revenue and Tax Policy Committee member, Luella, for trying to get that to the floor in a little better shape. But it was a complicated issue and more to follow.
Yep, definitely more to follow. Thank you. And again, congratulations on
thank you.
presidency. We'll be hearing a lot more of the League of Cities, or I should say Cal Cities, moving forward. So so along with 3 of my fellow council members attended the Cal Cities up in Sacramento. There were a lot of different sessions covering almost every possible topic that California cities are dealing with. But 2 of the ones that I found most interesting, one actually was pertinent for tonight, cannabis perceptions versus realities, so obviously very timely. The other one was on the California drought and can we manage our way out of it. And I found this interesting for a couple of reasons, because they had the water experts up there and talking about how challenging this is, that 2 years ago we were with an abundance of water and all it took was 2 years of drier winters for us to now be in severe drought that we're moving forward, where we desperately need a wet winter. What I found interesting about this as well is that we all know that that droughts can create wildfires. But I hadn't really thought much about the fact that fires create drought, because if you've got these wildfires, these trees are then losing their leaves and branches. Now the snows are going to melt sooner. The runoff will be faster, and and we're not able to use that as our snowpack that melts slowly over the course of the spring. So it was just interesting. This is completely cyclical, and the big message is we have to conserve. We have to increase our water storage capabilities that are above land. We have to explore salinization plants or desalination plants, and we have to each do our part to conserve water. And we're going to be hearing, if you live in California, we're hearing a lot more about this moving forward, probably every week now. I also was on a police ride-along last week where it was valuable to see really what's going on downtown. It was over a Saturday night, about a week and a half ago. Spoke to several businesses, spoke to about a dozen different officers. There's much more presence that are downtown now, that you see police officers that are walking along Main and Locust Street. You see that police cars are traversing more frequently. And I've heard from residents now, and I've seen this on Facebook, on Nextdoor, and I've heard from residents directly. They really appreciate this, and the fact that it's deterring people that may be coming in not to enjoy a quiet dining or drinking experience or shopping experience. So thank you, Chief Knox, and I appreciate the officers, and a shout out to Officer Shao, who had to listen to a lot of questions that I had over the course of our evening. And then I, as a liaison to Walnut Creek Downtown, I had the opportunity last week to participate with about 50 different businesses, listening to and interacting with Dr. Farnatano, the County Health Director, that was on a Zoom through all these businesses. And I took some notes from his presentation, and there was a lot of Q&A in there. And this really also speaks to what we heard from one of the businesses speak tonight during public communications from Tellus Coffee. Essentially, this is a requirement. The businesses don't have an option in requesting or requiring showing a vaccination or proof of a negative COVID test. People can eat or drink outside. They can get it for takeaway. They can show a negative COVID test, or they can show a vaccination card. The county health director was very explicit. This is a requirement. It's a direction. It is not left up to the businesses to decide. And if individuals are either not going to shop in the businesses or take it out on the businesses, you're hurting the very businesses that you're purporting to be worried about that are going to go out of business due to this directive. So this is not something that businesses should be taking on this and hearing from these individuals that may be angry. If you don't shop there, you're only hurting those businesses. If you have questions about this, feel free to direct them to mayor@walnut-creek.org, and somebody will get back to you on that. But this is a county health directive that is in force at this time. With that, the COVID numbers are going down, but not at a level yet that some regulations can be eased up on quite yet. The county health director is checking daily on this and reiterated that there's a lot of misinformation out there and that the minuscule chance of severe side effects from the vaccine pale in comparison to the effects of getting COVID. And he said again, and we've heard this from our city manager and others that have all the data. This is all the data that is coming from all the hospitals from within our county. 95% of current hospitalizations are among unvaccinated people. It's the cold, hard facts and the data. Vaccinated people can still get infected, but there are very few cases of severe illness among them. And so I just wanted to pass along that information that we heard directly from the county health director just a week ago. In addition to the DRAA and on Broadway, which was a phenomenal event and so good to see in person, and I believe they actually did raise about $250,000 on that one for the arts. I also was helping to kick off the Humanely Yours run walk that started on Saturday morning. That was early. That was 7:30 a.m. and I ended at 11 p.m. at the Leisure Center. And that is a wonderful program that helps support underprivileged students to get an education. They operate in 6 countries. They're actually based in Walnut Creek, right here. And it's just great to see that there is this level of enthusiasm really helping these underprivileged students from around the world. That's my update. All right. Whew. Next is our consideration item. And this is the options to allow additional cannabis-related uses. And we will be having a staff report. It looks like we have Mr. Andy Smith at the dais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, Andrew Smith, head of Long Range and Transportation Planning in the Community Development Department. I'll try to hover around this. As was mentioned by the mayor, we're here to basically discuss options that are available to the city with regard to commercial cannabis businesses. First, a bit of background. As I'm sure you all know, the medical use of cannabis was legalized in the state of California in 1996 with the passage of Proposition 215, and the non-medical use of cannabis was legalized with the passage of Prop 64 in 2016. In 2018, the City of Walnut Creek adopted local regulations pertaining to both personal and commercial use of cannabis. Specific to commercial operations, the city's regulations allow up to 2 medical use delivery-only cannabis businesses within the city, and there are additional locational requirements and operating requirements. From a permitting standpoint, these businesses require both a conditional use permit, that's for the land use itself, and an operator's permit. The use permit is something that once exercised, it generally doesn't expire, and it's something that runs with the land. The operator's permit is specifically tied to the operator themselves. It's something that needs to be renewed annually. It's non-transferable. In 2019, the city opened up a lottery for those 2 slots for the cannabis businesses in the city. And one such business did successfully go through the permitting process for the use permit and operator's permit and continues to operate today. It's Urban Joy. The second applicant did not see the process through. We then went to the next business on the list, and they too did not see the process through, and their permit has, their original slot essentially has recently expired. Earlier this year, the council directed staff to prepare a report again exploring the options that are available to the city with regard to commercial cannabis businesses, as well as provide an update on cost recovery, success or otherwise with regard to our permit application fees. So in regards to cannabis businesses, there's multiple types that are allowed under state law, various different categories. The ones that are perhaps most familiar to folks are, of course, the retail end of things. And with there, you have home delivery and your more traditional storefront type operation. And for both of these, there's really 2 subsets. There's medical use and adult use. Medical use is cannabis where, well, I mean, it's the same cannabis either way, but the purchasers have to have a doctor's recommendation. There are higher limits under state law in terms of the amount of cannabis that can be purchased at any one time for medical use as opposed to adult use. And the age limit is you have to be at least 18 to make those purchases. Adult use, also sometimes known as recreational use, although it is worth noting that not every person that is purchasing through the adult use channels is actually using it for recreational purposes. But adult use, there are lower limits as to how much you can purchase at any given time, and the age limit, you have to be at least 21 to make a purchase. Here in Walnut Creek, again, it's just the delivery for medical use cannabis that is allowed. Other types of cannabis businesses, there's really getting into the non-retail arena. Things such as cultivation, which of course is just the growing of the plants, manufacturing, things such as processing for creation of, say, edibles and other products. Distribution, of course, is self-evident what that is. Micro businesses are essentially smaller businesses that incorporate all 3 of those first, the cultivation, manufacturing, and distribution. And then you have testing, which is laboratory testing, things for potency, quality, etc. So given that we now know what those categories of cannabis businesses are, staff conducted a survey of surrounding jurisdictions to basically see, well, what are other cities doing? In 2018, this was, of course, a question of the city of Walnut Creek, this council, as well as every other jurisdiction, because things were so new, it was really hard to be able to look at, well, what is everybody else doing and what are their experiences? And so now we're able to report back with some more information thanks to the passage of time. So the survey that was conducted, we focused, like I said, on the area around, generally around Walnut Creek, 28 jurisdictions, 28 cities, well, as you can see there with the dots on the map. And I do very quickly want to mention that the work of preparing this survey, this is quite a bit of legwork actually, was done by our Rindy Azevedo, who's an analyst in the city manager's office. I just want to give credit where credit is due. Did a tremendous amount of research and outreach on this. So of these 28 jurisdictions, we found that it was about a 60-40 split in terms of which cities allow commercial cannabis operations within their jurisdictions. And of those 16 out of the 28 that do, all but one allows adult use storefront retail sales. That one that is also like Walnut Creek, a medical use delivery only city, is Pleasant Hill. Similarly, almost all of those, all but two of those cities allow one or more forms of non-retail cannabis uses. The two holdouts, again, Pleasant Hill and I believe El Cerrito. El Cerrito is just retail only. So knowing what the neighbors are doing, if you will, of course begs the question, well, for Walnut Creek's part, what should be considered in deciding what Walnut Creek should do? And so some of those considerations are, on the positive end, economic considerations. Bringing in more businesses, there's opportunities for new jobs, filling vacant buildings, opportunities for increased tax revenue. On kind of the opposite side of the coin, there are or can be concerns with regard to public safety. As a high-value, easily transportable product, of course, there's risk of theft if proper security measures are not taken. Also, due to federal banking laws, oftentimes these businesses are run on a cash-only basis or a largely cash-only basis, and that can attract potential for burglary and theft. And then, separate from criminal issues, from a manufacturing standpoint, the manufacturing operations can fall into the category of like a light industrial or industrial type use, and depending on the methods used, that can sometimes involve volatile chemicals, and so there are, of course, the normal considerations that you would have as with any industrial use if they were using those methods that involve those types of chemicals. Environmental, the main issue really is that of odor, and this is really more of an issue where you have outdoor cultivation. It's been actually an issue raised in Sonoma County, for example. Indoor operations, generally speaking, the odor impacts can be mitigated. And then there's location issues to consider, proximity to schools, parks, residential neighborhoods, et cetera. So what kind of regulatory tools are available to address these considerations or concerns? Perhaps the two most common are limiting the number of businesses, commercial cannabis businesses within a city, and buffer zones. As you'll see in I think it's attachment A to the staff report that has a summary of the results of the survey of the 28 other jurisdictions, you will notice that a good many of them do include, like Walnut Creek, limits on the number of businesses, typically in the low single, well, I'm going to say the mid to high single digits. Of course, there's a fair bit of variation, and then there are cities that do not place any such restrictions on the number of businesses. Also, there are buffer zone requirements. So, for example, actually in the state law, we have to buffer its schools, I can't quite read my slide to go off my memory here. Schools, daycare, religious facilities, youth centers. There's a 600-foot buffer requirement under the state law. Locally here in Walnut Creek, we have a 1,000-foot buffer requirement. This was adopted with the regulations in 2018. And in the case of high schools, it's a 1,500-foot buffer. Other options are your kind of traditional zoning route. We are talking about land use here, and land use is typically regulated, of course, through the zoning ordinance, and is currently regulated through the zoning ordinance. And so you can, of course, allow these types of uses or the different types of cannabis-related uses across the various different zoning districts, and have appropriate land use restrictions, permitting restrictions, operating restrictions, things of that nature. As another alternative, the city could also adopt an overlay zone, where basically you're creating a cannabis-specific zone that overlays all of the existing base zones. So rather than saying, okay, well, these are allowed in the pedestrian retail district and these are allowed in service commercial district, it's just here is an overlay zone that is custom for cannabis use with whatever appropriate regulations go along with that. And I will say that our current regulations only allow the medical delivery only non-storefront retail that is allowed in the city. They're only allowed in the service commercial district, which is essentially upper North Main between the freeway and Geary, and the business park district, which is in Shadelands. And then lastly, of course, we can have in our regulations, and in fact we do have in our regulations, security requirements to address and minimize the risk of crime associated with these businesses. So from more of an administrative standpoint, looking at taxes and permit fees associated with these, first for tax, much like, of course, any product for sale, there's sales tax. When you have more business-to-business things, California use tax, and of course, with more commerce, there's more tax revenue. It's worth noting that medical use retail sales are exempt from sales tax. Of course, that would have an impact on tax revenue to the city. The city also has the ability to adopt a local cannabis tax. And this is done, it has been done in some cases, certainly not by every city. It's something that actually requires a vote of the people. So there's a fair bit of effort, of course, and an expense in doing that. Like I said, not every city has these, and those that do have these, at least the potential highest rate that's been adopted locally is 15%. In terms of what's actually being charged, tends to be more in the mid to high single-digit percentages, generally 5 to 10%. From a fee standpoint, speaking of cost recovery, the conditional use permit that is required for these, we charge an hourly charge for staff time, as with any conditional use permit. And so there's full cost recovery achieved there. For the operator's permit, we charge a flat fee for both the application and then subsequent renewals. The reason why we did a flat fee on that case is because it's not just meant to cover the actual staff time processing, reviewing, approving the application, and inspections, but there's background checks, as well as potential enforcement throughout the year. And so there was actually a study prepared in 2018 that analyzed what the anticipated costs would be and essentially calibrated that flat fee to that anticipated cost. And I've had discussions with staff in community development and in the police department, and it's felt that the flat fee still is proportional to the expenses incurred by the city. However, the fee has not been adjusted since it was originally adopted in 2018 to reflect increased payroll and benefit expenses to the city. So what are your options? Having provided that background, of course, there's an infinite number of options available to the city, but we highlighted 4 in the staff report just for discussion. The first one is the no change option. Just keep things as they are. Up to 2 medical use delivery only retailers based in Walnut Creek. From that, you would of course not see any additional revenue to the city because you wouldn't be expanding to the additional businesses or types of businesses. Also, it is worth noting that existing local businesses within Walnut Creek could lose market share to businesses in neighboring cities that have more permissive regulations. We are seeing cities that have, in the surrounding area, and particularly nearby, have been opening up their regulations, and we've been seeing new commercial adult use retail dispensaries opening up. And so there is a potential competition issue there from a business standpoint. Long-term market saturation, so the market can really only support so many retailers, and if the retailers establish themselves in the neighboring cities where the rules are more permissive, and that if say in a future time the city of Walnut Creek chooses to open up the rules a little bit, at that point it might not be advantageous from a business standpoint for those businesses to then relocate to Walnut Creek. And if the market's already saturated in terms of just the number of businesses that can be supported locally, you wouldn't necessarily see those operating in Walnut Creek. On the flip side, of course, if you make no change to the regulations, you don't run any risk of potential additional impacts from the additional businesses or types of businesses. Second option that we discussed in the staff report is to allow limited adult use retail sales, so still staying at 2 businesses within the city or up to 2, but allowing adult use and perhaps storefront retail. This would allow local businesses, existing local businesses, as well as future ones within the city to remain more competitive in the marketplace. And the city could see a perhaps modest increase in sales tax revenue. Another option discussed in the report would be to allow, again, adult use, retail, storefront, but more than 2 units. I'm sorry, more than 2 businesses within the city. Again, more commerce equals more tax revenue. Also, at that point, it may be advantageous to the city, it may be worthwhile to the city to go through the effort and expense of putting a cannabis tax on the local ballot for consideration by the citizens. Generally speaking, our research and review of this subject found that it's generally considered the cost of essentially putting something like that on the ballot doesn't really pay for itself if you're only going to have, say, 2 businesses within a city. And then fourth option that was discussed in the staff report is perhaps allowing some non-retail cannabis businesses within the city. Again, there's potential benefits of more jobs as well as fewer vacancies, commercial vacancies within the city, and some additional use tax revenue that could come out of that. So our recommended action, really we're just looking for some general, for direction of what, if anything, the council would like to explore further. We're not looking for a decision tonight as to adopting, we of course don't have any draft regulations before you, not even necessarily looking for express direction saying, write this ordinance. Although of course that would be the right of the council to give that direction. But what we're asking for at the moment is essentially, does the council wish us to do additional research to find more focused research, I should say, in terms of perhaps expanding either the number or the type of cannabis businesses within the city. And then second, more minor recommendation is we do feel it would be appropriate to adjust those flat fee operator permit fees to match the changes in personnel expenses. But the changes are relatively minor, and so because of that, we think it would be acceptable, or be appropriate, I should say, to just wait until the next update to the master fee schedule and do the work then as part of that overall fee review. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I would note also that I've got a good bit of backing tonight to help me with difficult questions. Of course, we have Director Wardlaw, our Community Development Director, and also have staff from Finance and the City Manager's Office, and the Police Chief, of course, is here as well. So be happy to answer any questions.
Terrific. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate that. And was able to read through, of course, all the report and all the details that were sent along with that. I know there's a lot of questions up here from the council, and Councilmember Haskew had her hand raised first, so I'm going to call on you first.
Thank you. Andy, do we know any of the deciding factors for the businesses that didn't complete their applications? Did we do a sort of exit industry? Because, and the reason I'm asking the question, there was a lot of enthusiasm for people who were in the already medical industry who were planning on having advice and other things to encourage, and were looking for an outlet for their medical connections.
So to be able to provide really detailed applicant-specific information, I would have to reach out to those applicants. I will say that in general, we did hear concerns about the potential profitability of a medical use only business. But any additional information specific to those applicants, I would actually have to reach out to them and have a conversation, which of course I'd be happy to do.
Okay, I've got about 3 or 4 more questions. Is there any limit on where a Walnut Creek business can deliver? So if it was just a delivery only, under some changes, can they deliver outside the city? Are they allowed to cultivate customers in other places besides just Walnut Creek?
Generally speaking, they are allowed to make deliveries outside of the city as well.
Okay. Is there any, I'm going to look to Chief Knox, are there any kind of statistics about effects on crime from the cities that have operational?
Thank you. Yeah, we did receive some statistics from a neighboring city that has 2 dispensaries, technically 3, only 2 are really active. Generally, they saw maybe less than 2 calls per month per location. The majority of those were alarm calls or very few criminal activity. I think part of that is all of the legwork that went into developing those businesses or working with them to do a site security plan, things like that. Anecdotally, some of the other cities that were surveyed didn't notice a difference in public safety concerns, or it was very minimal.
Okay, thank you. Is there any kind of statistics about if adult sales were allowed in addition to medical one? Is there any kind of statistics that say 80% will be adult sales and 20%? Did we have any kind of information like that?
So generally speaking, at least within California, generally speaking, approximately 70% of sales writ large are for adult use as opposed to medical use.
Okay, and my final question so far is if we anticipated that we might just add maybe something like adult sales, how fast do you think the city can, how nimble can we be in making that happen? And I guess a sub-question is, you know, assuming we would only allow delivery, is there anything major that would stop anything like that?
To answer your first question about how quickly we would be able to adopt an ordinance, I would have to defer to Director Wardlaw with regard to the timing. As far as the second part of your question, I'm a little unclear. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I have that problem all the time. If we could speed be added if we kept everything as a delivery service and just said you can now do adult retail sales in addition to just medical?
Oh, do you mean would it take less time to prepare an ordinance amendment?
Yeah.
I would presume so, because there's fewer issues to be considered or reconsidered.
Okay.
If I could add to that too, it would require an amendment to the ordinances, so we would have to go through the typical public hearing process to be able to adopt that. And then the council would also have to give some consideration to, for instance, the issue of whether or not you would want to have some kind of selection process similar to what the council did when you authorized a delivery for medicinal marijuana services, because you do have one authorized and operating operator in town right now, but that was a result of a process that went through that allowed the operators to be qualified, and the city selected them.
Can I ask an add-on question to that? The original process was for delivery, medical-only delivery. If we were to expand to include adult use, is there a potential that we would find ourselves between a rock and a hard place if we just automatically gave it to the one that applied for medical? Or is there an equity issue in terms of competition? People who might not have wanted a medical only and might want, and therefore didn't apply originally.
So that is really, sorry, Mark, go ahead.
I think that's part of the policy direction we would seek when we come back. I think it would pose a fairly substantial change in what was first and originally established through the lottery for the medicinal delivery only. And so there will be different criteria, different conditions if the council directs us to proceed with an adult use scenario as well. So I think there'd be different evaluation criteria for those applicants.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councilmember, for letting me intercede.
And since I kept my microphone on, I have one additional question, which is, as I remember, when we set up the ordinance, we required that it be to a residence and it couldn't be to just anything. Is that under consideration as well?
So that is currently on the books, where deliveries can only be made to, I believe the exact wording in the ordinance is a fixed residential address.
So are we allowed to, when we open the door, can we mess around with that or that as well?
Yes, you can. I think, you really have kind of a blank slate to work within based on the changes that have occurred in law and what we've seen in the marketplace.
Councilmember Darling?
Thank you, and thanks for pulling this all together, Andy. So, as I understand it, with the medical delivery that we have now, youth between the ages of 18 and 21 are already able to purchase it if they have a doctor's note.
Correct.
Doctor's permission. If we add adult use, that doesn't change that ability. It only allows people over the age of 21 to purchase without the doctor's note.
Correct.
Okay. And then as far as the financial aspect relative to the city, it sounds as if, I just want to make sure I've got all this right in my mind. If we are just recouping our costs, we just use the ordinance and charge the CUP fee and the business license fee to recover our costs. If we want to get, and then whatever income we get is from sales tax.
Generally speaking, yes. The cost recovery is more just for the permit review with the CUP fee, but then the operator's permit, which has the flat fee, that one kind of covers everything else, if you will, as well as the processing of that fee. In terms of revenue to the city, sales tax is, of course, the most obvious one to point to, but there are other various taxes that apply to businesses, payroll taxes and use taxes when there's like business-to-business sales and the like.
And then if we ended up doing a referendum, we could add an additional tax onto.
Correct.
But it sounds like that's not advisable unless you have a certain level of, because of the cost of getting the.
Based on our preliminary review, yes, that's what we heard, is that generally speaking, for a small number of businesses, it may not be worth the cost of putting it on
Okay.
having an election.
And then I was just glancing through what Concord is doing right now with their request for proposals. It sounded like they were also looking at community benefits and asking applicants to describe what community benefits they could provide. Is that another potential source of funding for things that the city wants to do?
Certainly could be. Our existing process that was adopted by the council in 2018 was basically just a simple lottery, but that is something that can be done and has been done in other jurisdictions.
But it would be more complex than a lottery.
Certainly.
A lottery, you meet this level, you're in the pool. If you get drawn, you get drawn. If you're going to do a request for proposals and community benefits and all of that, then you have to go through and set your criteria and set the process. That's more complicated.
Yes, it'd be a discretionary process.
Okay. And then on security, when we originally were looking at the 2 medical delivery units, one of my fellow planning commissioners at the time was like, why just 2? Why not have more? And we were told by the police at the time that they were trying to evaluate whether or not they could use their existing level of staff. And they didn't think they could cover more than 2. Do you know if that opinion has changed or?
I would want to defer to Chief Knox to answer that one.
I was thinking you were sitting an awful long way from the microphone here.
Yeah, Chief Knox, you may just want to take a seat right there.
My understanding, based on the local business that we have here, we only had one incident that was quasi-unrelated to the business itself, so I don't have any concerns related to a number of businesses. Usually it's a discrete operation, unmarked vehicles. Usually people are none the wiser of what's being delivered, and that's how we like it.
Mm-hmm. And then one of the things I heard at Cal Cities when they were talking about cannabis experiences in other cities is they were saying that in some areas they specifically crack down on unpermitted, illegal cannabis distributor channels as part of this whole process of bringing in licensed. Is that something that we might want to do here, or is that not such a big issue in Walnut Creek?
It varies from community to community. Some communities have clandestine operations, everything from cultivation to, chemical extraction, things like that, which is very dangerous. But that's certainly something that we would look into. I don't know if there's any studies that would suggest having an increased legal business would encourage other illicit activities or not, but that's something that we would certainly keep on our radar.
Okay, thanks. You can sit down right there. And-
Don't go far.
And then as far as process, it sounds like you can do a lottery, you could do a request for proposals, or you could do some kind of a hybrid between those. And
Yes, some jurisdictions have like a point-based system. I mean, there's a fair bit of flexibility, I should say.
Okay.
And if the council wished to, go that route, of course, we could explore all those options.
Yeah, and then as far as how many businesses we would, if we decided we wanted to go forward with this, it sounds like you could do an overlay, but it sounds like in some cities, between the areas of special consideration that they can't be near and the limits on where they can be and the buffers between retail uses, it might not, a strict limit on the number of uses might not be needed. It just, when I looked at the maps of where you could put a dispensary or a delivery business in Walnut Creek, it seemed like it was fairly small areas.
As it currently stands, yes, it's restricted to just 2 zoning districts that they have a limited geographic coverage of the city.
Okay. When you looked at other cities, were there other zoning districts where they were allowing?
Most commonly, you find these in industrial or light industrial areas, whether or not that's necessarily even appropriate for a retail use, at least. But that's where you will typically find them. Some of the larger cities, you'll sometimes see storefront operations in retail areas or even neighborhood shopping centers. I'm thinking some that I've seen, say, in San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Jose, things along those lines.
Okay, and then the last question was, I remember hearing the percentage by which the proposition that legalized cannabis passed in Walnut Creek, but do you know that number?
I kind of want to say it was 64%, and I hope
that's-
I'm not confusing that with Prop 64. I remember the numbers were close, if not the same. And it did. I know it did pass in every precinct.
And we don't have any more updated information on public interest in cannabis other than anecdotal?
Correct. We don't have any at our disposal.
There was a survey, though, that was sent out in addition to the Prop 64. Is that what we were talking about?
Yeah.
Yes, that is correct. That was actually prior to the adoption of the local ordinance that was adopted in
Okay, so
2018.
nothing since.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Silva.
Thank you, Andy, very, very, very much. I appreciated the statistics about the number of cities in our area, but when I look at the list of cities, and then I winnow it down to the 680-24 corridor, because that's really where we're located, which is from the Benicia Bay Bridge, Martinez, down to the Alameda Quarter, there are really only, besides Pleasant Hill, which is like us, Martinez and Concord.
Yes.
No cities in La Marinda, none in the Tri-Valley, including in Alameda. And of the cities that are doing this multifaceted, they are significantly, they tend to be larger than we are. I mean, Antioch, Concord, Richmond, Oakland, San Leandro, and they also tend to have industrial zones, which remind me, last time I checked, we had no industrial zones. Our last one was the batch plant, and it's been long gone. So we're not zoned for industrial uses.
There are some like light and custom manufacturing that are allowed in some of our zoning districts, but we do not have a dedicated industrial zone. The closest, I would say, would really be the service commercial zone on Upper North
Right.
Main, which is where the batch plant was.
Which is where we allow the delivery businesses now.
Yes, correct.
As well as the Shadelands Business
Correct.
Park, some areas of Shadelands Business Park. But my assessment of the comparison of the other 15 or 16 cities is accurate in terms of the size of those cities, the number in the I-680-24 corridor.
Yeah, the more bedroom communities, if you will, suburban communities, they tend to not allow them more than the other jurisdictions, as you note.
It seemed like on the chart that you offered the options to us, that there is an option in between that you didn't mention, but Councilmember Haskew did, which is delivery only, but adult use and medical. You didn't allow for that in the chart. Is there a reason for that?
Really, it was just For brevity, if you will, just throwing out.
But we do have that
options.
option.
Oh,
So you
certainly.
could maintain the mode of sale, but the type of product, you could expand the type of product but maintain the delivery-only mode of sale.
Yes.
As opposed to going to storefront.
Yes, you're definitely not limited to those 4 options.
The, do we have, we're going to hear probably a lot from the public about the potential for revenue, but really the sales tax revenue without a voter-approved add-on for medical or marijuana purposes, the sales tax revenue that we receive is a penny on every dollar of sale.
Yes, correct.
So do we have any data at this point in time on what that might be on a typical local store such as, anybody give it a swag?
I will be happy to defer that question to Kirsten Hansen, our finance manager.
Given the size of our market, et cetera, and I know that's.
Good evening, Mayor Wilk and council members. Kirsten Lacasse, Administrative Services Director. So in general, a successful retail operation would see about 4 to 5 million of gross sales. And so
in a year, not a month or a week.
Correct.
Okay.
And so that we would derive about 40 to 50,000 in sales tax from that. So we can sort of use that as a base.
And that is that a typical operation across the state? Is that what we're using as statewide averages, that a Muni Services or an Avenue, I guess is what they're called now, or HDL would tell us about what's happening in the market?
Yes, we did receive that information from HDL, and that's actually specific to Contra Costa County.
So it's not the 880 corridor, but some of Contra Costa is in the 880 corridor.
Yes.
And that's just for retail. That's retail. Is that delivery and storefront, or is that?
That would be storefront, and that would be the adult use, which would be subject to the sales tax.
Okay. That is exactly what I needed to know. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem Francois?
Thank you. A lot of my questions have already been asked. Had one about the operator's permit, to get a little technical. So the use permit, when it's issued by the Planning Commission, runs with the land, and it doesn't lapse unless there's a violation of the conditions, right? What discretion does the city have over that operator's permit, the annual permit that the operator has to come in and get renewed each year?
It's similar, essentially, compliance with all the various regulations. It's just that it takes a positive action by the city to continue the permit rather than a negative action to revoke it.
So it's done at a staff level, and provided that the operator is complying with all the conditions and the plans that they've submitted, it would likely be renewed?
Yes, that's correct. It's essentially a ministerial type permit at that level. We also do inspections, vehicle inspections, for example, and those can actually occur throughout the year as they bring in new vehicles, which in fact we had to do just, I think, last month for the one business.
Okay. If the terms of the plans were not being adhered to, it'd be relatively easier for staff then to revoke that operator's permit than
Yeah.
it would be to revoke a use permit?
Yes, there wouldn't be a hearing required or anything like that.
That's correct. You don't have the kind of the vested rights component you have with the CUP. This is a permit that is required to be renewed annually. And so if, for instance, they were not in compliance, or alternatively, if there was a change in policy direction from the council, then the city could opt not to renew the permit.
Okay, thank you. And then my only other question at this time was on security, and maybe for the chief. Given that you came from San Leandro, and we had a survey here that talked about some of the finances and the security issues associated with that, can you speak a little bit to your experience there and how the dispensaries work there, and what kind of security issues they pose for the police department, if any?
Sure. So on a storefront, typically you have a check-in area. So you can't just walk into the business and start browsing through the product and select things. You would have to go through a security checkpoint, almost like TSA, if you will. Usually there's a security guard at the front. You'd have to present your ID to prove that you're over the age of 21. Sign in, and once they authorize you to enter, you would enter a separate area that's even more controlled where the product is located. That's where the sales staff is, and you can make your selections, consultation, things like that. They'll check you out. On the front end is usually a site survey that the police department could collaborate with the business owner on. Everything from security cameras to parking lot security, how they would run their operation, their security checkpoint. Usually there are background checks that can be involved, especially when it comes to, people who are working security at the location. Also down to the details of vault storage and things like that. So it's usually a case-by-case basis, but from my perspective in San Leandro, the security was very well run. There were very minor issues when we had the protests and the looting events on, May 31st and June 1st of 2020. We did have a couple of issues at those locations, but those were more crimes of opportunity, I think.
And then just one more question, Chief, on the ordinance we're delivery only of medicinal. It's not supposed to be highly visible, but still the ordinance requires one security guard, I believe, on site during all business hours. If it were to be more of a retail operation than delivery, what sort of security plan would you want to see for such an operation?
I think it would depend on the size of the business, and it would be site specific, but at a minimum, one security officer, if not two, per location.
Okay. And then I think that's all I had for you, and I did think of two more for Andy. On in terms of now the
point.
I'm not giving up on the prospect, but it seems like this is the most immediate way to acknowledge that maybe in our care for what we were doing when we did the original one, we really should have addressed, gosh, I hate saying this, but we should have addressed adult usage, and it's the way we can get adult usage with the least amount of disruption to the current system. I am not saying giving up on stores. I said, I think the last time, my concern are the stores are sort of the future version of video rental units, where they are very popular now because they're new and unique. But when I was listening to comparing, what we could do, I think in the short run, and the already established retail, we're so far behind, we won't even catch up. So,
Okay.
I am not wiping out any of the retail opportunities.
Okay. But you are wiping out the non-retail opportunities, the cultivation, the...
Yeah, no,
Okay.
they fit my,
Yep.
they smell and they explode.
Okay.
places.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
So thank you. I appreciate hearing from my colleagues on this, and I certainly am in agreement with expanding to delivery of adult use. And where I'm a little bit torn still is on the storefront. And I think, from a security standpoint, I have a confident feeling from hearing from the police chief of his experience, and that this can be regulated. Where I'm a little bit more concerned is, where are the appropriate zones for this? Where we allow medical deliveries now is in the business park and service commercial districts. Councilmember Silva pointed out that you can't have standalone retail in the business park. So Shadelands is essentially out. And we're limiting, if we kept to the same zones, we would be limiting these uses to one stretch of North Main Street and burdening one neighborhood with this particular use. And I don't think that that's fair. I also am, I'm not shutting the door to it completely, but I have concerns with it being a cash-only operation, and how sales tax is accounted for and how security issues associated with that are dealt with. I will say that I did visit Velvet just recently, just this afternoon, and it was, I thought it was operated quite well. There was a security guard there. They checked my ID when I came in the door. The staff was very friendly. They did explained to me the different products. I said, I'm just here on a due diligence mission. I'm not here to buy anything. But they still spent the time with me and explained kind of what their more popular items were and kind of how the operation works, and I appreciated that. I don't see necessarily a big upside from sales tax either. I think the sales tax numbers that our administrative services director told us are likely true. I'd be somewhat interested in finding out what sort of deal Martinez struck, if they actually did strike a deal. That sounds like it would be a really good deal for Martinez if they got it and they were getting 25% of the revenues of the business. I'm not sure it was maybe quite that good, but still, that would be something, that and the zones that it's allowed in, as well as I certainly wouldn't want an unlimited number. And so then I think when that potentially could balance out. It being restricted to one particular geographic location. But that's sort of my current thought process on this.
And what about the non-storefront uses?
I think I agree with council members Darling and Haskew on that it's not prudent to expand to that at this time.
Okay. Councilmember Silva.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of the people who came to give us their points of view tonight. Having been here, as was Councilmember Haskew, and also for part of it, or actually...
That was the whole thing?
Mayor Wilk, I'm just going to say right here, first of all, Proposition 64 had a key component in it, which was that it's ensured that every locality had the authority to make the appropriate decision. It was not dictated by the voters. The voters said, you have the ability to manage your land use and do this at the local level, which is what Danville and Dublin and Pleasanton and Livermore, all of whom had a supermajority that said yes, did, as did we. I was appreciative of the time that we allowed for delivery of medical, in part because that was what was asked for. That was what how it was positioned by the public. We need it for medicinal purposes. So here's where we are today, and I am willing to explore, well, I think we should move to the delivery of adult use because it's the easiest and most efficient way to get to those two licenses more effectively. But I do say that the licenses we issued under those rules or the process we used was different, and it won't be an automatic wave your magic wand and Urban Joy gets adult use. I mean, that wouldn't be fair or equitable, and we would be accused of being prejudicial and probably would, the headlines wouldn't be pretty, that's for sure. As for the storefront, I think we could get there, but I have many of the same concerns that Mayor Pro Tem does, which is there are only we are a small area. Most of our neighborhoods are actually residential or in open space. And so when you remove the residential neighborhoods and you create those buffers, even if you are reasonable, you come down to very limited number of parcels, which when we did it 5 years ago, that's what it showed. It is not like Concord. Concord has twice or 3 times as many areas and commercial areas and manufacturing and industrial areas. So it might not be a large number. And we had a long conversation 5 years ago, 4 years ago, about protecting the pedestrian retail district as being not appropriate for these kinds of businesses in the same way that our grocery stores, pharmacies, and liquor stores are sitting not in the pedestrian retail district, because the idea is you come down here, you go to lunch, you go some shopping, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not sure where the land uses would be. And as to your other question, no, I am not in agreement with testing, distribution, manufacturing. We don't have those types of land available for that. And it would just, if we put it in the business park, it would just be trucks on Ignacio Valley Road, which, let's get into those vehicle miles traveled. So, and I think we need to explore carefully what kinds of agreements our neighboring communities have actually, we want to see the agreements. They were approved at a council meeting. They're in the minutes. We should be able to see them and see what's been, what the options are for us.
All right, thank you. So my comments are, and a lot of these are going to be similar to, I think, a majority of the council here, but I think the medicinal only, and Councilmember Silva was absolutely right. There was a cry out from the community at the time that we need to have medicinal. When Prop 64 passed, the unintended consequences, I remember very clearly, the unintended consequences are that it's much more difficult to now get medicinal marijuana, and we need to have it approved here. And that's why we passed it. Now, we need to get up, I think, to the current market landscape and resident desires. We received, well, obviously tonight we heard several dozen people that spoke in favor of this. I don't think one person spoke against it. We've received several dozen emails and letters in support. Maybe we received one that was against it. We've seen that consistently there's over 60% of the people, when they've been surveyed, have wanted this. So I think that we need to get up to the current market landscape and resident desires. I would be in favor of adult use for delivery, certainly, but also for stores. I would want to keep a restriction on it for right now. I think that that would be important to do this in a stepped approach. And I think we do need to have a level playing field. Right now, the advantage is with businesses that are not located in Walnut Creek, so I think that's important to recognize. And certainly where they would be located. So I think that would be the next step that we hear back on the report, is where are recommended places that these could go. But as I'm thinking North Main Street, frankly, another location, and we'd have to check to see about zoning and obviously we'd have to talk about if we would approve it, but the Rossmore Safeway Shopping Center, which I think would actually have a lot of people there that would go, and it's not permitted for that now.
It's because of the buffer for schools.
So these are the kind of things that we would have to have a report back on. But I could see but I think that we can open up our eyes to places that they could be that we might not be thinking of right offhand. And I agree, actually, that the downtown district would not be appropriate for this. I would be open to other non-storefront types of businesses, but as I've heard from my other council members, I'm much more I understand we don't have the land space for that, and so I would tend to agree that that's probably something that we can't explore at this point. So we should have a limit on these businesses if we do have a storefront. And I do want to say, so I disagree with Councilmember Silva on one point, and we would have to hear back from the city attorney on this, and that is that I liken a business that does delivery to a business like a restaurant that if they did not have a takeout window and then they wanted to open a takeout window now that they're in operation, or they wanted to get a liquor license, we wouldn't make them reapply as a restaurant to then do that, and then they could lose the entire business if they didn't get it and somebody else did. I look at this please let me finish, Councilmember Silva. I look at this as an additional use that it's up to the council to decide if we then would allow that to happen. Now, if we do go back into a lottery for these businesses, I think that one thing that we should do as somebody that is overseeing the business license that we currently have for one of our businesses, that should they apply for this, that they should have the right of refusal based on that meeting any further application requirements, that they don't potentially lose their business because we're opening up one more avenue of being able to do business. It just doesn't seem fair to me. So we disagree on this. But that's my feeling, is that if a business is looking to expand their use, they shouldn't be penalized by losing the entire business. So, and those are my comments. So we can discuss that at the next iteration.
I think the city attorney might explain it.
And I'm sure we'll have a lot of information on that coming from staff as well as city attorney. But it seems like our consensus right now, at least in terms of direction, and we can take a vote on this, is that we all want to expand delivery into adult use, and we're open to seeing on the report limited storefront operation, meaning I suppose two, but how that would work with land uses. And that we are not open as a council?
Yeah, that's not really, I thought for now the consensus was that we're all agreed on delivery
Right.
for adult use, and that
But we're open.
perhaps in the next iteration, further down the road, not in the next report that we're getting, but
Oh, I didn't, okay, I misunderstood then. I thought that we had said that we would,
I think you should weigh in, Councilmember Silva, because you thought we could get there, and I'm not sure.
on the next report, not obviously that we're voting on doing it now.
What I heard is that Councilmember Haskew said delivery only, the iterative process, step one. That's what I heard from you as well.
Yes.
And that's
There
what
are-
I heard come out of my mouth.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
not a no
There are
on storefront, but it's not a now,
Yeah.
analyzing it.
I understand that. So we're saying that we don't want to go to the step of analyzing a storefront at this time? Is that what I'm understanding?
What I think I'm never sure what I said, so I'm going to tell you another chance at what I meant to say, which is we have the system right now about delivery.
Mm-hmm.
And so expanding that system to include adult is an attainable goal, and we have staff issues, we have other priorities, we have lots and lots of things. I want to keep it to where we can do things efficiently and get to a goal that is attainable in the short run. I don't even think we would be comfortable collecting enough information at the same time to come to a reasonable conclusion about any of these other things. If miraculously someday the staff woke up and said, by the way, we want to tell you what we think about the opportunities in store fronts, I'm for it. I just don't think we have the capacity right now to demand that as part of an immediate.
So, did you have a further comment, Cindy?
You know, and I recognize that we're at a point where we have some staff constraints. My reluctance to go in and say that we only are doing delivery now is that I remember, I mean, it was, 3-4 years ago when we said we were going to do medical and then we'll revisit it. And I don't know if it's economically to our benefit to say, okay, now we're going to go from medical to adult delivery and then let 3 to 4 years go by before we get to storefront. Are you?
How did we get to 3 to 4 to 5 years?
Well,
Yeah, I just said, let's start with the easy stuff. I didn't put a time frame on anything.
Let's do
so
this.
is what I'm thinking. If you say, okay, we're going to proceed relatively quickly with adult delivery, and we are going to proceed at a measured pace to storefront, that's different than saying we're going to do delivery and we'll think about storefront later.
No, I didn't ever say that. I
Okay, so
just said, let's accomplish what we can accomplish. Next on the list is storefronts, because we all said we were interested in storefronts. There was no time frame, no anything. If somebody could present a report tomorrow on storefronts, I'd say hallelujah. But I just don't, no, I'm not looking at 4 years. I want it done before I'm dead or no longer on council.
So if our direction to staff was proceed relatively expeditiously with the delivery of adult and proceed with measured cadence towards storefront and the issues that are going to have to be dealt with about what the zoning is and how many and where,
So
does that capture what people are thinking?
let's take this one step at a time. Raise your hand if you're in favor of adult use for delivery.
Wait a minute.
No, just.
No, I understand. Can we get a little feedback from staff about if they have a suggestion about how this, is that an awkward question?
So while they're conferring, could I say just one comment? I think moving expeditiously through the delivery of adult use is reasonably straightforward. I think the question of how quickly would we proceed through storefront adult use is an overarching economic development question that is being juxtaposed with how do we save downtown? And it's not by putting a couple of cannabis stores, adult use stores downtown. There are bigger economic development issues that we're grappling with. And I think I would appreciate staff kind of bundling that secondary issue with that as more of a holistic approach in that regard. But that's one way of thinking about it. And
Yeah,
that is on the hot burner. That is on the front burner. It's just there may be some issues that come in front of.
Yes, I think when I look at the economic development challenges facing us, moving forward with the rebound, the next step on rebound is probably the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are things like storefront cannabis, single family or short-term rentals. Once it hits 10 o'clock at night, I can no longer form words. Short-term rentals, those are a lesser priority than how we deal with downtown. And I am hoping we get to a point with our staffing levels that we have the ability to move several balls forward. And I don't see cannabis as being anything to do with what you would do downtown, because as you said, that's not where we want.
But we have to learn how to prioritize. So anyway.
Dan.
Yeah, let me just offer up in terms of, possible direction. It seems there's consensus on moving forward expeditiously with adult use delivery. And that is something, so I believe we could offer a concurrent path. We could begin, if the council's interested, in bringing forth an ordinance to Planning Commission and ultimately to council that would allow for that effectively under the same locations and same zoning that's in place. We just basically change it to adult use in addition to medicinal. Concurrent to that, in order to expedite, we could bring back a discussion about how many businesses to allow, as well as the process for selecting the process for how to determine who would get those licenses effectively. So that could be a concurrent dual path that we could move those quickly forward.
Is that delivery?
Delivery, correct.
Okay, that's all delivery.
That's all delivery only. And then the storefront, that is, based upon the discussion of your council tonight, that is considerably more involved. If we're re-looking at effectively where those would be allowed, under what zoning uses, what restrictions, that is a considerably bigger lift. We could bring that back down the road. I'm reluctant to put a time frame out there at this point. But if the urgency is around adult use delivery, I think we can do that fairly quickly to bring that forward. I don't see that being a big staff lift. And then if your council wanted, as part of the discussion about how to determine the process for who would ultimately get the licenses, we could have some additional discussion about storefront if that were in the council's interest as well, to see where things are at. But we wouldn't be doing a lot of research between now and then on that issue.
And when would that come back to us?
Well, it has to go to Planning Commission first, so we'd have to update the ordinance, get it to Planning Commission, and get it to council. So, we're at least looking at several months before it comes back, but.
You've got the holidays in here.
Right.
For the storefront?
No.
Oh, for delivery.
Or
as well.
delivery, for adult use delivery, if an ordinance change has to go to Planning Commission and ultimately to council. So with the couple-step process, yeah, there's no way we'd have it before the holidays. It would be into the new year.
All right, so it sounds like, just to make this visual, it sounds like the five of us are agreed that we would like to move forward expeditiously on the delivery adult use. Is that right? Yes. Nodding of heads? Okay. In terms of storefront, knowing that it would take longer, is this something that we would like staff to move forward on it as staffing and time allows, knowing that they will be on different paths? Is that something that we want staff to begin to undertake, or not at this time? And that's what we're looking at, right?
For me, the most important thing, it's part of an economic development question. And for me, the most important thing is really the bigger issues of the economic recovery of downtown the downtown next. I think we're going to get some pressure in some other arenas, including the business park. And I think it's part of a, maybe in 6 months, where does this stand versus all of those other things that still have to drop and come out of staff?
And, right, and we've already identified that cannabis is under economic development as an
Right, but it
umbrella
doesn't, it's
priority.
not at the top for me. I'll just be.
Okay, it's not at the top, all right.
It's not at the top in the same way that TOT collections for short-term rentals is not at the top. Making sure that that our downtown recovers and we're moving forward for the future. And all of that work has started and is a high priority for us, and we said that. So that is where I land on this, because sometimes you cannot have it all. It all can't be
Yep.
first.
Right. All right. And Councilmember Darling, your feelings on this?
Yeah, I think we've talked about moving the rebound program into the next phase is the highest priority. And then things like the short-term rentals and cannabis are at a lower level, and we'll look to staff to help us identify how quickly they can move on those, knowing that rough priority.
Is that acceptable, Councilmember Haskell? Okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I'm in agreement for the reasons
Okay.
that were stated.
So Dan, let me ask, without putting a timeline on it, is this something that staff can then give us guidance on in the next, say, 6 months of how this could potentially come back to us for a discussion on storefront? Not that it would happen within 6 months, but that the guidance would happen within 6 months.
And we can certainly entertain some additional discussion as part of the broader economic framework in 6 months. I'll have to confer with staff about how much research we could do in terms of actual zoning, that sort of thing. But if we're looking at it as part of the broader economic development plan and how does it fit, that is something that, we can tie in the next 6 months. We'll be bringing other updates on commercial reuse or use in downtown. The retail study, I just signed the contract yesterday, so that's moving forward. I'm sure we'll have an update in the next 6 months, so we can fold it in on that. Go ahead, Councilmember Darling.
And I was going to say, in that report out, I would be interested in understanding better. I think one of the things that we don't have a good sense for right now is what is the economic benefit that you could attain from this beyond the sales tax. And it sounds like it's out there, but we only have a rough idea based on more word of mouth than anything, and I'd be interested in understanding.
Okay, that's helpful. We can track some of that down. I did have a question going back to adult use delivery. If we're going to work expeditiously on the ordinance, the quickest thing we could do is effectively just modify it to change it from medicinal only to medicinal and adult use. Currently, 2 delivery businesses are specified. It's limited to 2 in the ordinance. We would proceed with keeping it at 2 unless your council suggests otherwise this evening.
Keep it 2?
I'm fine with it because that one's moving quickly, and keeping it at 2 keeps it simple, even though Eric Harrison somewhere is yelling in my ear, why only 2?
I agree, keep it at 2 and go quickly.
I can accept that.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Can I just verify that because the one that was approved expired, then we will have 1 open?
You would have a minimum of 1 open. You arguably could have 2 open, but just 1 candidate who already has a facility that you could do this. So the council has not specified yet whether you would, whether your preference or anything would be to grandfather in, if you will, the existing business. But that's something that the council could consider, and I think that's also relevant to the issue of potential community benefits for even a delivery service, because it is substantially modifying the potential for the business. And so the council should, I think that's, I don't mean to put words in the city manager's mouth, but I think that was part of the parallel discussion, is that you have a zoning change, but you also have a kind of a look at the process for selection And I just would want to clarify one point that was a point of some discussion earlier this evening. The existing business doesn't lose its rights by virtue of what you would be approving with the addition of adult use. Potentially, any existing business, because they're on the one-year operating permits, they're always at risk that they could lose their operating permit. But simply the fact that they would apply would not cause them to lose their rights or that you would even grant them. So there is, theoretical possibility that you could end up with, and I want to be clear, this is only theoretical, not actual, because I can understand the business owners could be concerned about this too, is you could theoretically end up with 2 new adult use businesses and continue to have the one medical. And that's something that the council, could ultimately consider. But that, in my view, that also goes into your selection process. What exactly do you want to get as something for the city in exchange for granting this right that is, that is recognized as having value? So.
Okay. All right. Do you need any more direction? You have the idea.
I think we got it.
All right, all right. Okay, we're getting close, but we're not there yet to the end of the agenda. We need to go back to public communications. I know there were a couple people that had their hands up before. If you still want to speak on public communications on an item not on the agenda, now is the time to raise your hand. We'll give this about a minute. I'm not going to go through everything all over again. Everybody knows how to do this. You're on Zoom, raise your hand. We'll call on you if you have something to be said and if you have not spoken already. Give this a minute. I don't see anybody that's raised their hand. Okay. All right, so, which now brings us to adjournment, that we are going to be adjourning the City Council regular meeting in memoriam of Kitty O'Malley Maffei. Tonight's meeting is being adjourned in her memory. Kitty is a former U.S. Navy section leader and the first female Standard Oil executive who recently passed away at the age of 96. Born on October 13th, 1924 in Vandalia, Missouri, Kitty's family moved out west where she spent her early years on a farm in Fresno County. With a strong willingness to succeed and a can-do spirit, Kitty joined the United States Navy and against all odds rose through the ranks to attain section leader status and eventually landing a position in the Admiral's office in San Francisco. Following her naval career, Kitty entered the private sector and again rose through the ranks, becoming the first female executive with Standard Oil. Attributing her success to a strong willingness to do a little more than the next person, Kitty succeeded with no MBA and no BA, just a phenomenal work ethic. Among her many awards, Kitty was awarded a presidential citation for her work in support of vocational education. As a Walnut Creek resident, Kitty had a loving passion, caring for and supporting the homeless population. Kitty the Candy Lady, as she was lovingly named, founded Fresh Start, which is now Trinity Center, along with her friend Susan Prather. Fresh Start provided basic meals, showers, laundry, and other services, including passing out candy to the homeless population in Walnut Creek. Kitty also cooked meals, especially on holidays, and fed the homeless in the park. Kitty served the community of the Walnut Creek Transportation Commission and was a classroom volunteer. Kitty enjoyed playing piano and had an infectious laugh and passed out hugs almost as often as she did candy. Kitty is predeceased by her husband Raymond, brothers William and Carl, and is survived by her son Joseph, grandsons William and Anthony, great-grandson Colton, and dear friend Brett Norlin. Ever the volunteer, Kitty has requested no memorial service, but instead donations to the Trinity Center in Walnut Creek. And I'm sure they would be certainly grateful for that. And with that, we're adjourned till our next meeting on October 19th. Thank you.